6:15. Welcome along, everybody. Also, welcome along to those of you who are not on the committee. First of all, officers and also councillors, welcome along. Thank you. So, first item on the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting, 11th of November. Any comments on these, happy or otherwise, please?
I propose they be accepted as written, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Randall, comment?
Yeah, no, only on the comment E2.1, the part that obviously it was noted that the 7-year contract was proven to be unrealistic. Unrealistic on what terms? You know, that I've got a problem with that.
Chairman, if I may, I think what the sentence says is emphasise that recycling landfill targets set by the contractor that are proving to be unrealistic. There's targets that are unrealistic as opposed to the contract itself.
But I don't agree with that. I don't believe that they are unrealistic because other councils are hitting these targets, and I think that actually if they recycled in a different way they wouldn't be unrealistic. If we saw a cardboard going in brown bin, it may not be unrealistic. So that was just my point on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Randall's noted. Perhaps you're welcome to bring that up again later when we discuss portfolio holders, etc. This might provide an opportunity to re-invite Councillor Craven requests. Thank you. Any other comments? No. Okay. Thank you for that vote. Councillor Long. Thank you. Councillor Randall. Very good. Apologies?
Just Councillor Patchett.
Councillor Patchett, thank you. Declaration of members' interests.
None, Chairman.
None, thank you. To remind you all that this is a non-political forum for both sides. Actually, we have two. Obviously, it's all about scrutiny and improvement. So let's move on to the corporate strategic plan. Item 4 on the agenda, the third quarter performance 2014-15. This is where we hand over to Julie, who's going to walk us through the document. Have you all got a colour copy of the document now?
Yes, thank you.
Very good.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
Sure. No, I can see yours from there.
So, for those of you that are not regulars now, the customary practice here is for Julie to walk us through the indicators, particularly focusing on those that are red, justifying the reason they are red, and also giving us a status on the direction of travel, which is the column next to status column. We also have the opportunity to quiz Julie about any performance-related issues, and the objective for us reviewing this in the first place is that we can understand if there are any performance issues that we need to investigate further. So with this, I'll hand over to Julie, and of course any questions through please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just a reminder that this is a report for the end of Q3 that was actually the end of December. So albeit we're now in February, we are thinking about what the position was at the end of December. So if we start with the first one, being 1.1 commercial floor space, no change on this one from the previous quarter, showing that we've achieved planning permission for 2,700 square metres of the 6,000. So although there's actually no change there, we've stated it's likely that by the end of the year we will achieve 5,500 square metres. And I always say, I won't say this, but we did actually achieve that planning permission in January, so we have already moved on that one, and it certainly will be really, really close by the end of the year.
This is a lagging indicator.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, good news on that one, it has moved forward. The next one, again, no change from last time, town centre retail and leisure floor space with planning permission. That situation hasn't changed, it is ongoing. It's unlikely that TCV Site 3 will contribute this year. So that one is likely to stay as it is for the next quarter as well, till the end of the year.
So that one will stay red,
Yes.
Can I ask a question on that one?
please.
This is where historical data sometimes comes in handy because of our footfall. You know, I questioned that last time about footfall and how it's measured, but obviously we've got no historical data. And I looked up some data for 11-12, and the footfall was nearly 122,000. So I know that we're red, but obviously then we lowered the target. So I'm thinking, you know, if we achieve that, we then went lower than the target. And why did we do that? But that's where historical data sometimes is useful to have.
Thank you. Any comments, Julie?
So can I just explain that the footfall is just a comment we put in there. It's actually nothing to do with the target and the progress. The target and the progress is purely about planning permission that's actually been achieved. It's just that historically we've always put some comment in there about the footfall because it shows how well our town is doing. To take your point about the historical data, we do have that data, and where we actually get that data from, we do record it month on month, year on year, which is how we actually show, you know, how it's compared with last year. So we do have that. I mean, it's back to the questions we've been having about how much we show and how far we go back and how we present things. But we do have the historical data.
Julie, is it an indicator in actual fact that would be relevant for the future, since we refer to it? Is footfall a good indicator in this area? And would that be an indicator in its own right, potentially?
I don't.
Since we refer to it every quarter anyway.
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, obviously it was raised when we reviewed the corporate strategic plan that, you know, councillors and officers were all involved in when we reviewed it last year before we set these measures. I think, yes, it's an indicator of what's going on in the town, and we compare it to how we're doing nationally. I mean, the fact that we actually comment on it there and we refer to it anyway, I think, you know, the information's in there. It's kind of, I mean, one of the discussions we had was how many measures do you actually have and how far do you go?
Mm-hmm. So any comments? Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak, not being a member of your committee. Footfall is, as you say, well and good. It's a reasonable indicator, but footfall without a view of the economics of that time. And we knew that high streets, the footfall of high streets went down dramatically over a period of time, and they're now coming back. Your figures show that they're not coming back at great speed, but at the end of the day they are coming back. But I think the message is, as far as I'm concerned, footfall should be tied into the economics of the day, and high streets have taken a severe knock in this last couple of years with regard to internet shopping, etc., etc. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Okay, let's move on to the next.
So if I just answer.
Oh, unless you want to come back. No,
just on that, we do compare our footfall with the national footfall for just those reasons. And what we are generally finding is actually we're doing better than the national footfall figures in comparing us with similar kind of high streets. Yeah. That's where, you know, we do put that information in as well for just those reasons.
Sorry, Chairman, could I just ask one question following that one through? I spent the afternoon in Northampton this afternoon, walking through Abingdon Street and up through the shopping area. It's noticeable there, in particular, just how many shops are actually currently empty. Is there any comparison between footfall and actually the number of occupied shops in an area? Because obviously, if as such, let's say you've got 100 shops, 25 are not occupied, does that have a bearing on the fact that people say, well, actually, it's not providing the...
There's no point going to that particular part of town.
There's no point in going. So is there any link between the number of vacant properties within a location and the footfall that actually we record, or the trend, the comparative trend between the two?
My guess would be there probably is, but it is a guess. because we compare, like the next line, town centre void rates, which is your empty properties. Obviously, we compare that to the national average. So again, from what we might be actually, what we could say from that, probably wouldn't stand up in court, but we're saying our void rates are 4.5% as opposed to the national average of 10%. We're also saying that actually our footfall is higher than the national average. So from that, you could possibly deduce, yes, there's a link. Whether that stands up scientifically or not, I don't know. But the data we've got, no. We get void rates, we get footfall.
I don't know if there's a relationship between the two.
It would be interesting to see the statistics actually planned on one graph, to actually see whether you have three curves which all mirror image one another, because I think it is important to, people say, it's going up, we're going down. Is that in relationship to shops doing better because the same number of shops but more footfall is coming through? Or is it in fact we've added a better selection, so more people are coming because they want the other alternative? To me, there is a real good reason, and there is something beneficial to be gained by actually understanding that link, Chairman.
Councillor, do you think there's, there's probably a bigger issue here about the indicators that we use and if they make enough sense? We'll come into that anyway a bit later on Councillor Randall's task panel. But maybe there's something to take back to the portfolio holder, particularly in due course. It's not a formal request at the moment, but simply a conversation I have about what we track.
It's observation, Chairman.
Sorry, 1 minute. Councillor, sorry?
I said, sorry, Chairman, I didn't want to make it a major point. It was an observation that I thought would be a very useful comparator, because then you'd have some true record as how each was relating to one another, which at this present moment in time seems more random.
Yes, some logical relationship. Before Councillor Perry comes in, one question I have, and in terms of town centre, the scope, is the Abbey retail park in that scope? No. Because there's been some interesting analysis recently done of some of these retail parks, particularly some of them being colonised as kind of even regarded in the local community as discount zones because of the kind of retailers that are moving in. Would it be more helpful, in fact, if we actually moved the Abbey retail park into the scope of the town centre measuring? If so, why is it not already in there?
I don't know why it's. I don't know whether it's. I don't know. I'd have to look at the town centre definition as to exactly what, whether or not it's the Abbey retail's not classed as the town centre. I don't actually know.
Okay, would you be able to look at that and come back to us next time, please?
Yeah.
So we'll make a formal request on that information. It'd be useful to know. Councillor.
So thank you, Chairman, for letting me speak. Can you tell me whether I'm right or not? I understood from a few years ago that the footfall was counted by marks in the ground that counted people. If it was to take in the Abbey Centre, if that's not already in there, it would cost quite a bit of money to alter that.
Yeah.
They're in different places around the town, and they count. But if this isn't in and you wanted that included or whatever, you'd have to put more in.
Well, I think for me the starting point is, if it's not, why is it not? Because it's part of the retail scene throughout the town. And would it give us a better... Because the 222 you refer to, is that number of actual units? Are they what could be regarded as a single trading unit?
Yes.
So that's what that is?
Yeah.
So even though there won't be many potential sites down there, it still also affects the equation somewhat. But it's useful to know because that is part of the retail landscape of the town. Councillor Perry.
Yeah, going back to the footfall and the void rates, they're crude measures really for what's going on. I think the key piece of information is actually the makeup of the town centre. I think it's interesting to see what mix of shops you've got overall, simply because we could have no void properties, but they could all be bookmakers. And I think the strength of the town centre is better judged by the mix and makeup of the shops. If you've only got one butcher's and one candlestick maker, it's not a very strong, yes, you've got one supermarket, but if you've got a strong town centre, you'd have a very mixed offer, from clothing to food, niche mark, these shops, whatever. And I think that if it was included, it would give you a better picture of what's going
So
on.
the diversity of retailers. Thank you. Julie, I think there's some food for thought there, some observations from the committee, and also a clear action for you to come back to us on for the next meeting, please. Let's move into the next sections. So the next one, actually, before you come to the reds, can you talk to us about 3.1, the profile of Daventry District, and because that's gone up.
Yeah, we're currently showing that we've achieved 17 out of 25. It's always a difficult one to actually kind of guess and judge, because you can't predict, actually necessarily what the national media are going to pick up on. It does talk about positive national media coverage. A little bit quiet in December, but you can see that we've had a range there between May and November. And we're hoping, given all the good work going on in the council, that there'll be some more good ones coming in January, February, March.
Thank you. Members might want to consider, as we're going through the work, the indicators here, potential invitees for the next meeting. There could be an opportunity to talk to Councillor Howard about the communication strategy. Councillor Randall.
Yeah, just going back to B2 on the B2.2 on the UTC, that we've got target and progress. It's every quarter it's just saying the same target and progress. Do we know? Obviously, spaces are available. 600 spaces are available, but do we know how many actually have been taken up?
Good question. Julie, do you have information on that?
I don't have that information.
Again, that might be useful information. So we know that there's 600 spaces available. What's the actual occupancy level? So what we're looking for is actual number of students. If you could gather that information, that might be useful. Again, we always know that we're bystanders of this information, but I think if you want to give a richer picture, that would be useful. Thank you. I also compliment you. Non-members will notice the way the information is presented in this column. So we have, if it's a non-mover, it's the black arrows each side. Green indicates it's moved up a status level, because obviously we use a very simple red, amber, green status approach. And the red going down obviously means it's changed status in the previous quarter. Okay, so we've looked at the media one. Let's take us on to the next one, please, Julie.
Okay, if we move on to E2.1, reduce the amount of waste generated. No change in the landfill waste is still over target. It's unlikely to, it won't achieve target because it's already over where it should be.
That's lost for the year. That needs noting, particularly to the members.
And that's the situation as it is. We've got more waste going to landfill than the target requires.
So can we just have a look at this? So actually this is slightly lower than the amount of September to December 2000, because that number, that's the absolute number for the year, isn't it?
Yes, that's where it is to date at the end of December.
Yeah, so for the sake of clarity, so 2.1, progress, 375, is 375 kilos per household cumulatively for the year. Whereas the same time, by the end of the third quarter in 2013 was 378. Slightly lower, only 3 kilos, but not much in it.
Chairman, can I just make an inquiry? Obviously, we're going to miss this year, as Julie's just confirmed. What's the target for next year?
It will. I haven't got it off the top of my head, but it won't be very much different to what it is there.
One would hope it's not going to come down.
When you say, very different, what do you mean very different?
The targets are done on a kind of, they start from the original, whatever the original was, and they vary slightly each year, but not all of it. They only vary a little bit. I'd have to look at the contract to actually tell you exactly what the targets are for next year.
Is it going to be higher or lower? I mean, sorry, hold on. Let's get our heads around this, because a big number in this is not a good thing. Okay.
Yeah, it will, I'm just trying to recall, because I'm dealing with so many figures. It will either be the same or slightly lower for next year, because we kind of look at a slightly better performance each year of the contract.
Chairman, sorry if I could just come in. I mean, this sort of picks up on the earlier point that Councillor Randall made as well around the targets on that are covered by the contract, environmental services contract. The targets in the corporate plan reflect the contractual targets.
Yes.
And we have had discussion time after time to recognise that we're not achieving those targets, or the contractor's not achieving those targets, and performance penalties are in play. Portfolio holders have taken the view when setting the targets in the plan, that they wanted to reflect the contract as opposed to reflecting reality in the performance of the contract. So we are where we are in terms of what we report.
Yes, I mean, I know. I think we could probably have a discussion about this later when we discuss who we invite in as portfolio holders. But during this last meeting and this already today, I feel we've got a sense of resignation about this. Maybe that's not the case in terms of hitting our targets for next year. So maybe there's a conversation around there for the portfolio next time. I'll come to Councillor Paul first. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, from 305 up to 378. 378, yeah. I can see why it's in the red. However, with problems of delivering a contract, and I say that with inverted commas, has that had a reflection, with staff numbers, the difficulties that the contractor has had, needs to get the job done, etc., etc. And, if one of the officers could tell me, if we've been paid for the recyclers, etc., etc., then that would have an effect on it. But
I think, Councillor Paul, there's a fundamental problem with this figure, and that I think we're not entirely happy with it as a committee based on previous discussions. The fact that for a start, we know it's an absolute number, which means obviously that's it. Once 305 is the target for the year, we've got 375 already this year, so way over target already, with another quarter to run yet. And I know that it's been operated on very high level by officers and portfolio order, but it never seems to change. And it's fundamentally very depressing, I think, to sit here every time and have this discussion. Councillor Long.
The area of concern I have, Chairman, is that, and the reason I asked for the forthcoming figures, thank you, Tony, for making that point. I'm just, when you consider about the debates which have taken place in the council chamber with full council, and we've had representations made by the contractor that would require asking that the figures be varied, reduced, etc., to make them more realistic. We always identified at that particular moment in time, should that have ever been agreed, this council was open to legal challenge from the two contractors who unfortunately didn't get this contract. The reason I asked the question is just with that in the back of my mind, that ultimately I'm looking to see that we are still sticking to the contract, so that at no point are we leaving ourselves open to legal challenge because we have made a variation which would allow them to do that, because at this moment in time,
yes,
this council would not wish to afford that sort of legal cost in defending such a challenge.
For sure, I think that the problem is it's not so much the target which needs to be based on the contract, it's the performance of the target which is depressing, because you never seem to be hitting it. And I don't know. What I'd like to see is more detail on the root causes for their failure to meet their targets, and perhaps we can again pick up this a bit later on in the meeting.
Bringing that one back up though, Chairman, is there not a real risk that if as such we don't see an improvement in that figure, that those two other bodies might actually still determine to make a challenge on the basis that the council actually isn't seen to be taking action to improve that figure, and therefore almost effectively be accepting it at that level, which is a default to a reduction, even if it hasn't agreed it.
It's an interesting comment. Tony?
I think that just in response to that the contract allows for pay adjustments where performance isn't achieved. So there is a route within the contract to manage the financial implications of that, and that route has been followed by us in respect of...
I trust you understand my concern, though, from the point of view of making sure that we are absolutely watertight, and there is no way by the back door somebody can come back and make a legal challenge, because the cost of that would probably be more expensive. Defending it would probably be more expensive than what we're actually getting in return.
Because there is an issue here. You could argue that we're happy with the status quo in actual fact and not meeting that target.
Precisely.
Yeah. Councillor Perry, and then we'll move on to the next one. I think. Next item.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the figures. I'm sort of more interested, like yourself, getting down to the root causes. Now, I remember years ago when we first started going over recycling, we actually had the capacity to look and survey some of the bins along the round to see what was in there. Because one, we seem to have an increase in packaging in general. If we look at more people internet shopping, there's more packaging coming into the home. There's obviously an issue with the cardboard, and I think, that whether it's the contractor or whether it's us ourselves, there has to be some more sort of looking into the rubbish and seeing what the makeup of this landfill increase is, because there might be easy ways of solving some of the increase. I wouldn't say all of it. It would also be interesting to see, obviously, if people are recycling generally as much as they can, because if they are they filling up the bigger bins with more rubbish which they normally take to the tip? So there's a whole host of issues. It's whether we've got the capacity really as to how we can analyse that to find some solutions.
Some data. Before I come to you, Councillor, there's a question. When we take waste from other sources other than households, how is that also in this measure? What else is that included in that? So
it includes some street cleansing and commercial waste, etc. It's the waste that goes to landfill.
So, because there's a point here. So, if you had a bin in the high street, for instance, that would also contribute to the overall target.
Yes.
But in the high street, there is absolutely no segregation opportunity whatsoever for waste.
So just to cover a couple of points and something Tony picked up on as well. Just to say on this one, in terms of the contract, this hits the contractor hard in two ways, very hard. One, in that the more they recycle, the more money they actually get back from recycling credits. So if they've got more waste going to landfill and not recycling, they actually lose money. They are also, one of the payment defaults in the contract is that if they don't hit the target, so they're not hitting recycling and they're not hitting the landfill targets, there is actually a payment penalty as well. So we are certainly not accepting they're just doing what they're doing and we're not taking action. We are enforcing action and we are, if you like, penalising them for that. Now, we don't actually want to be penalising for that because we actually want them to achieve the targets, but it is in their interest financially to try and achieve those targets.
But Julie, if it's so painful for them to be in this situation, why do they perpetuate this situation? Because that makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. But we are asking, what are you doing? Let's see your recycling plans. Let's see these plans, etc., etc. We are asking those questions.
But it appears to be making no material difference at the moment. Councillor Long.
I take on board Julie's point, and I totally understand how it hits them in the pocket. I've got 2 points. One is, it still concerns me that the outside world, there is a perception that it isn't improving, and that effectively it is almost a default position. So
it's a holding pattern.
It's a holding pattern, and almost look, we can't turn around and do anything about other than this, but actually, as far as the other contractors are concerned, it could be by default. Well, on the basis you're not doing it, then the contract wasn't valid, and perhaps the way in which tendering took place and the results you're accepting is not right, and we therefore could challenge. The second question I was actually going to put, I would be really interested in this one. The tip is now closed 2 days a week. I would be interested to see if there is any change in statistics. Well, two things. I'll be interested to see if there's any change in statistics with regard to landfill, recycling, more importantly, fly tipping. And as that happened in February, we're now into that position. I know we're talking about historic now, Julie, but I really would be interested in those three elements going on from here to see whether any of the closure is in fact going to take more pressure off of NCC by only opening 5 out of 7 days and throwing it more at DDC, which in fact, if that's the case, there is a financial default to actually go back to the county and say, you do realise you might be saving money, but you're costing us more money to do this.
And simply displace it. Well, I'm sure that'll come through in the figures anyway, of course, as we'll see. Councillor Paul.
Very quick one, Chairman. Coming quickly back on Councillor Long, I mean, the tip when it was a private entity, run perfectly well, 7 days a week, and the recycle rates were excellent, because at the end of the day it was more profitable for he that had the business to make them. I also have concerns about the operatives that are doing the job.
Do you see them on the roundabout eating sandwiches like I did today?
Well, yeah, but
Can we see that? When you come to come out the roundabout, just in the middle of the roundabout.
I don't have a problem if they eat sandwiches. I do have a problem, however, when I see a blue bin and a red bin chucked into a black bin and then put into the landfill lorry. People in Norton, Allen Hills and Ivory in Norton, one of the biggest complaints they had in Norton was because that was the case. And I witnessed it myself over Christmas. So is there enough supervision on their operatives? I don't know.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next item. I think there's always, you could always fill a whole meeting with this topic, but we have to take a broader view on other things as well. So let's move on to the next one, please, Julie. Thank you for your contributions.
The next one, street and environmental cleanliness. This
Can you give us the code again, please?
Sorry, E3.1.
3.1, thank you.
They do, basically, again, within the contract, they have to carry out an annual survey. There are timings when they have to do that. It's supposed to be just prior to the end of their year, which is June. We've just got the results through. So we only see this kind of, obviously we wouldn't have reported on it the last 2 quarters. Their target is actually 85%.
Is that meant to be in the first column? Because in the first column it just says 85%.
Yeah, I've just noticed there's a missing percentage mark there. I do apologise.
We are talking about the same number.
Yeah,
so
it should be 85% is the target, again, according to the contract that they signed up to, and they actually achieved 36%. And what it actually measures is percentage of people who assess their street as clean or very clean on the results from the survey.
So Julie, what are people saying? I mean, you have a 64% of the people. What are they saying? It's just basically filthy dirty, or what? What's their views on this?
Well, it doesn't go into detail. We get some, individual comments, but basically they're asked to. I don't know if any of you actually had the surveys because they go out randomly, but it asks them to rate whether or not it was very clean, not clean, really dirty. So there's like 4 or 5 categories, and this looks at 36% are saying it was either clean or very clean, which is what we are saying is an acceptable standard.
And this is it now. The survey's done for this.
Survey's done. They've come back with 36%, which is no bones about it. It's not good. Last year it was 49.63%, so it has gone down significantly from last year. We have already had several meetings with them, and we are awaiting their action plan stating what are they going to do about the situation.
They're going to sit on the Icon Runabout eating sandwiches. Councillor Long, you next, then Randall.
It's a technical term, is it?
It's what they were doing today, with the van down in the middle of the roundabout eating sandwiches. What kind of impression does that set us?
Pretty awful. But there again, well, I have one question followed by a statement. The question is, the figure is all the way across the figure we have quoted here, I assume, to be right the way across the district, yes?
Yes.
Do you have breakdowns between the district and the town? Because with the greatest respect, Julie, the town's a disgrace. And I'm really happy to go on record. Daventry town, wherever I walk, is an absolute disgrace, with paper and litter in fields, on the highways, in roads. It's sometimes worse once the bin men have been around. I can tell you that from my road, because I go around most Saturday mornings after they've been and tidy it up. The stuff was in the litter was in the bins before they arrived. The street was relatively tidy. When they left that street, there was stuff all over the place, cans, bottles, and that's personal. I just cleaned it up. But walking around Daventry is an absolute disgrace, and that's why I'd like to understand the not only this figure across the district, because having talked to some of my fellow district councillors who are rural, they don't seem to have the problem that we do here, so much of the problem that we do here in the town. And I'd love to know the statistical breakdown.
Thank you. We'll come to that in a moment. Councillor Randall, because I think perhaps, we can perhaps break this down in a bit more detail at the end.
No, I was actually going to ask the same, whether this was just for the town or across the whole district. And yeah, I've got about 20 litter pickers, regular litter pickers on my ward now, so I'm pleased to say that actually houses are very clean, but it is a disgrace, and the approaching roads to Daventry are absolutely awful.
Thank you. I think what I would like to perhaps propose on behalf of the committee is that we actually note that we're actually very unimpressed with these figures. Councillor Redden.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree that things could be better, but at the same time, a lot of this litter, or the majority of the litter, is caused by people. I know for a fact that the gentleman goes around and empties the bins in the recreation ground most mornings. If it's a nice day, you can go around there at dinner time and you'd think it's never been touched. So, as well as sort of perhaps trying to get these to do better, I think we've got to do something and stop it at base. Because if you don't, it's just going to go on and on.
There probably, there's various studies done on there which means people are more likely to drop litter where they see litter because of the general care for the environment. But what we do know we can, for us, I agree entirely, but the point is, what can we control and manage with an indicator, and that in the case here is theirs. And yeah, absolutely, they never could, but 36% is, that's 14 percentage points lower than last year alone. Julie?
Sorry, I just on a sort of a general basis, yes, with all of these things we look at, that there are, and shopping trolleys comes to mind as well with all the correspondence we had over that, that there are two issues. There is what is causing the problem, and what are we doing to clean the problem up. And what we do, obviously it's different teams across the council, but when all of these issues come in, we look at, right, what can we do from an enforcement point of view, which is, where can we serve notice. EMS are, and it is in the contract, they are required to notify us of hotspots, certain areas of problems where it's more prominent. So we do try to tackle things on both fronts, both with, after it's happened, but what can we do to prevent it happening, and enforcement as well. We've got a campaign going off on the 2nd of March, Don't Be a Tosser campaign, that has been endorsed by everybody, that EMS have now signed up to as well, to try and discourage people from littering in the first place. there is the element, yes, of people dropping litter and how they behave. There is also the element of when the bins are actually emptied, what is happening then. Again, the contractors state that EMS should clear up after them. We are enforcing all of those at as high a notice as possible. And now I've got an extra member in my team as well. We are literally serving remedy notices by the day as to where there is a problem that the contractor hasn't actually abided by as well. So we're trying to look at the problems, from every aspect, possible. The education, what can we do, the contract, and the whole approach to it. And I was going to say, sorry, just come back to the point earlier about the bins. And there's no recycling bins. Again, it's in the contract that they should be providing recycling bins in the streets and whatever. And again, we have served various notices on them saying, you need to do this, we want to see where this is going to recycling. So please, we are doing everything possible to within, the powers that we can use to actually enforce things on a number of levels.
And I think we also have to look at what we can measure in terms of our indicators. Councillor Long, Councillor next, then Councillor Port, and then actually I want to move on for the next indicator.
Mine was just a comment, Chairman. I wouldn't like, it sounds as though we're throwing everything at Julie, by the way. I just wanted to make the comment that we're bringing forward into the districts that we live in. We do appreciate Julie, I certainly appreciate Julie, the work that you do to try to make life better and the hard work that you put in. I wouldn't want to do your job for all the in China, to be honest.
Quite frankly, Julie probably hates coming in. That's our job.
It's an unthankful job with the problems that you've got. But I just wanted to make it clear that this is not aimed at Julie, this is aimed at the problem.
Thank you for that.
There are two places in Daventry that you can identify which are always dirty. And that's the area around the Southwood School, especially during term time, and the area around William Parker during term time. Outside of term time, you can litter pick it and it will remain clear. During the course of term time, you pick it in the morning, and by the evening it's as bad again. So there are two very easily identifiable areas all the way around the premises of those two schools.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Paul?
Yeah. I think you've heard me say it before, Chairman. My wife and I often put the car on the ferry, travel around France, Belgium, Germany, and it's pitiful to come back to this country to see the debris alongside of the road. However, are we sure which roads, which verges, the highways?
Councillor Iden, Councillor Long.
Sorry.
Are we sure which roads, verges, highways are responsible for, i.e. going on to motorway? Are we sure which ones the county are responsible for, and in turn the district? I think it would be useful for you to know that, Chairman, if we're looking at an overall picture, and I totally agree with Councillor Long that the town is disgusting, and I also agree with Councillor Long on more than one occasion I've had to use Julie's professional skills, and they were absolutely outstanding.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Paul. Let's move on. I don't want to talk about waste any longer.
Can I just make one?
We've got a heavy schedule to get through. Councillor Perry, make it very quick. We've got a lot to get through.
It was what Councillor Long said about the interest of statistics in the town and the rural. I think it's interesting to note that a lot of the parish councils employ their own litter pickers. Wheaton's just had another employee, so Wheaton does look better than Daventry, but there is a cost.
Thank you. And I think the point is, this is not good enough. It feels like we're in a holding pattern, and I certainly would be interested in inviting the portfolio holder in for this a bit later on. We can resolve that later. But can we have it noted that, is it fair to say the committee, from our review of the performance, are not satisfied with these statistics?
Far from satisfied.
Far from satisfied, thank you. But perhaps we could also say that we do note Julie's endeavours, but it's a chronic underperformance we're not satisfied with. Thank you.
I should stress that not Julie's endeavours on her own. We are,
Julie's team.
we are a
Julie's,
team across the council. It's not just my team. We all try.
We recognise that, but more needs to be done clearly.
Don't ask the portfolio is it pertinent to ask somebody from the contractors to be present?
Could well be. That's a good. Hold that thought, Councillor Perry. Let's come to that shortly. Let's move on to the next indicator. Let's give ourselves not too much longer on this because we've got.
We've only got one more round. I'm pleased to say. I'm not pleased with this round. There's only one. 4.2 conservation area appraisals carried out. Again, there's no.
Sorry, say that again.
E4.2.
Thank you.
Just at the bottom of page 2. No change from last time. It's exactly the same situation due to pressures of dealing with speculative planning applications. We simply haven't had the resources to actually look at the conservation area appraisals. That again is kind of developing in that resources are being identified and looked at to actually deal with planning applications to try and move that forward.
So basically, it's a diversion of resources onto more pressing matters.
Yes.
What does annual target, not profile, mean?
It means it doesn't change.
Doesn't change, just that one target.
Yeah, there's a target for the year.
Not profiled by quarter. Any
Chairman, if I may assist, I mean, yes, the speculative applications have been absolutely astounding in our area. I have asked officers of this question several occasions, and for what it's worth, I'm more than happy with the comments made about the pressures of the speculative planning application. I think that sums up the situation very aptly.
What's the thank you, Councillor. What's the implication of this target being read? Julie.
Well, it's a target. We as officers, members, consultation. We set the target in terms of if it's not met, is it a serious threat to anyone in terms of, it depends how you rate it. It's not serious in terms of health and safety, etc.
It's not high risk target.
Yes, in terms of that, yes, it's not high risk. I mean, obviously, in terms of us as our corporate strategic plan, we endeavour to achieve as many targets as possible. But it is a question of priorities, and the priorities have had to be on the speculative planning applications, which we haven't had a choice about. So,
The trouble is, there is a risk.
Toby, next.
So if I can just qualify the approach to Julie making that. It is identified as a priority for us. Else it wouldn't be in the corporate strategic plan. So it is something that is important to us as a council. I think just to elaborate a little bit on Julie's explanation about where we're going with this, there is within the budget report, which is going to strategy group this week, there's a growth element in there to provide additional resources to help move this on and to deal with some of the planning issues. So there's a plan there to take this forward. It is likely to slip into next year, but
there's a corrective action plan. Thank you. Councillor Perry. Thank you, sir.
Well, I think there is a risk with this particular indicator simply because we can't do any more conservation areas until we've appraised what we've already got. And if we've got speculative planning applications, there is going to be risk at the conservation areas we've got. And in one in particular, which I know several of the parishes in my area are interested about, is the Plenel. And obviously, that's been done for some time. It needs to be appraised. So I think there is a risk. It's a different sort of risk, yes.
It's not a critical risk in the same respect as
if you want to preserve the district's heritage, yes, it's critical because it's about where we live, and we want to preserve the best bits and improve the worst bits.
Councillor Paul?
Just a quick comment regarding the canals. I mean, they are conservation areas which are looked after by the Waterways Trust, are they not? And I don't see a problem with that. I also don't see a problem with highlighting another conservation area, but as Tony has said, that when you're looking at planning applications and you're looking at are these on the edge of conservation areas, it's very difficult to get a jurisdiction if they haven't been appraised. So there is a risk that I would suggest at this moment in time there are greater risks that would take a priority.
The greater issues, and besides Tony said there's a plan anyway going to strategy. Thank you very much. Julie, any others or any of you to bring our attention?
I don't have any other words. Everything else is...
Well, let's have a look at what to see if any had moved down into a different band. There's only C3, which is the corporate plan, which has gone.
It's just moved down very slightly, and that obviously reflects
still in green.
the numbers of all the rest, so it's just dropped down very slightly from last time.
Of course. Any questions, anybody, on any other indicators?
Yeah. 3.1 and 3.2.
What are they again, please?
Number of new homes.
Which one, sorry?
3.1, H 3.1.
Page 3.
Thank you.
The number of new homes delivered and the affordable housing. Obviously there's a list of schemes which is underway. Is there any information as to the types of housing being provided? Because it's a crude measure when you say 350, is that 351 bed apartments, 354 bed apartments? Is
That's
that
actual number of new homes, rather than
is it actually meeting the need of the population growth as opposed to just meeting population growth?
Julie, can you give us some insight into this one, please? So 350, is that a what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, that's 350 new homes.
Yep, so that's the analysis, that's the measure, yeah.
No, it doesn't state whether they're 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. The target number is 350. Again, it's how, what do we measure and how far do we go down? I mean, obviously, within to get the figures that we have in the comments column, we could break that further down to actually, from that pick out how many of each category there are in each scheme. I mean, obviously each planning application, Tony probably knows far more about this than I do, but each planning application considers the need and the requirement.
Yeah, I think, Chairman, if I can just help Julie with this, she's quite right. There isn't that level of analysis in terms of the data that's presented to you. It could be put together because we have the information through the planning process. I think the comment I'd just like to make, well, 2 comments. If the following indicator, H3.2, looks at affordable housing, so in terms of priorities, growth is a priority, affordable housing is a priority, so those are priorities as have been set with the corporate plan. It is a once-a-year measure. We measure at the end of the year. We do an assessment at the end of the year. That's why it's marked as amber at the moment. We expect to reach the target at the year end.
The reason I asked the question is because I'm interested, because it comes with the housing portfolio, as to how it relates to the housing strategy. I'm more interested in that than the planning policies, because obviously we have a housing strategy in place which is delivering certain goals. It's really looking at, I mean, if we could have a planning development, we've got a speculative development of Wheaton, and they'll provide affordable housing. It's how do we look to see whether it's the right sort of housing we're looking for the area. Yes, I know there's housing needs surveys, etc. But it's just looking...
So the profile of homes is correct.
Just looking at the profile and seeing that we are getting mixed tenure.
It strikes me, thank you, Councillor, that because of course you have the opportunity to invite Councillor Warren in to get a deeper analysis of this, should you wish, at the next meeting. So you've got so many issues coming up, you can invite any portfolio one for further analysis. Don't forget this is a kind of high level we're recipients of. Let's take Councillor Paul's comment.
Yeah, what would help, without making this column, war and peace, I think possibly the percentage, I'm looking at Tony, the percentage of affordable housing, or affordable dwellings, let's not call them houses, the percentage of affordable dwellings within these schemes would tick the boxes. I would suggest. Because when we look at housing, everybody thinks of a lovely house and the garden and all the rest of it, but that is not the case. We have to look at these as dwellings, which could be, a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or a block of flats.
Okay, thank you for that.
Tony's going to say the same thing as I am, I'm sure. So.
I think what we need to just remind ourselves of it is this is a corporate plan. The indicators, the amber indicator, you can't read the text very well, certainly not on my coloured version. I think we perhaps need to look at that. The yellow is on the top of the pages is unreadable to me. I think it says within 5%
and on target to meet.
On target to meet. So we are saying that we expect to meet that target. The commentary there is just to support that thought in terms of or the expectation that we'll meet it. I think your comment on War and Peace, we could include all sorts of information there. But,
Thank you, Tony. Well, I'd like to truncate that discussion now, actually, because you'll find anyway we're going to have a whole scrutiny report back on the way the corporate plan information is presented, which Wendy will walk us through shortly. Councillor Ryan, sorry. But in actual fact, our position as a scrutiny, we can't dictate the information on there, but because it has become a recurrent theme that we're not entirely happy is probably the best way to describe it, the information presented, hence we had a scrutiny panel to look at. So what I'd like to do there is say, let's draw a line under that one. Thank Julie for her time and the questions you've asked. Hopefully it's given you some insight and some extra flavour of performance issues you may want to raise. Julie, if you so wish, you can escape quickly.
Bye.
Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
So let's move on. Item number 5, the rolling work programme. This is for members who haven't been long before or people who haven't been long recently. The rolling work programme is our opportunity to discuss the task panels that we've got in the work system, the rolling work programme, and we're going to kick off with a final report which has come back for committee this evening. I always like them when they come back home again. And the way we approach it, of course, as always, is the chair of the panel gives us the report, talks us through it, then have the opportunity to ask some questions and analyse it, challenge it, etc. And then we take a vote on the recommendations. So, Councillor Long, please talk us through this excellent piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, very much indeed. If I may, I'd like to just ensure that members here are totally clear upon what this report is due to do. The report is specifically about Daventry District Council entering into partnership working with other authorities. It is not a scrutiny review of the building of the crematorium in Rugby. It uses the information with regard to what happened in that process to enable us to draw the conclusions that we do. But I wanted to make it very clear, this is not a scrutiny review of what happened. We use that to gain the information to actually be able to assist in future work.
So it's a way for us to have been able to look at the case like a case study or a vignette as a way to take some learning.
But there is no intent anywhere within this report to say we could have done this better, we could have done that better, we could have done this. That is not the point at all. The point is to how do we assist Daventry District Council in the future with regard to such instances as this, effectively by learning from the past. Very much forward-looking, Chairman. I just wanted to get that really clear before we started.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on that, or does that sound clear in terms of the objective and the use of this particular case study to highlight examples? Okay. Right, so can you give us a flavour of... I mean, everybody's read it anyway, I'm sure. Okay. But if you can take us through the highlights, that will be very useful.
Indeed I will, Chairman. I will come back to the advice at the very end because I think that's the right place at this particular time. I think the introduction, information probably as far as 4.4 are fairly easily read and understood. What I would like to do is to expand just a little bit, Chairman, when we come to 4.5 and some of the points that I raised. I'll walk you through each, not all of them, but the ones I want to highlight. For example, 4A, the most important and fundamental element for any successful joint partnership is trust between all parties and individuals. It may sound obvious, but it isn't always obvious. There has got to be trust between members, officers and all parties to make this work. In the instance of the review that we looked, there was a lot of trust between people concerned, and because of that I think that's one of the reasons why such a successful project was actually delivered.
And how do you measure that, Councillor Long, that trust?
I think trust is the fact that if you talk to the officers and the members, there was never any questions. If somebody brought a view forward, it wasn't questioned in terms of, are you trying to undermine this? There was always the trust that the points of view were being brought forward for the best interests of everybody, that they would benefit the project being delivered. So it's trust in those terms that nobody's trying to undermine anything. They do have the benefit of the project at heart by bringing forward anything at all.
A shared mission, really.
It's a shared mission. And it has to be a shared mission, Chairman, if you're going to get the sort of success that we've got.
Thank you.
So that's point one. Point C, partners need to share a common ethos and agree short-term, medium and long-term objectives in the early stages. The example I'd like to give on this, Chairman, is very much a matter of let's take the crematorium and let's take a hypothetical part to this. Let's say, for example, that Rugby Borough Council wanted a crematorium and burial area because they simply wanted to provide a service for the residents of Rugby. If Daventry District went into it along the lines effectively of being a cash generator, a way of returning capital money and returning a revenue income, then if by any chance, what the point I'm getting to is that Daventry, part of the way down the line, could say we want to maximise the amount of money that we're going to make out of this project because we need it to fill our financial requirements. Rugby could say, oh, hold on, actually we're not in it for this. We are in it simply to deliver the necessary services, environmental services, to the residents. If that sort of review is not agreed at the very beginning, you could have a falling out of the partners very early and you get the whole thing going totally wrong. So
kind of different philosophical approach.
You really need to understand that the short term, the medium term and the long term requirements of this joint partnership are actually agreed at all stages so that it doesn't fall apart.
So aligned objectives.
Absolutely, totally aligned objectives, Jim. Beneficial organisational structures need to be considered when looking to take advantage of tax, such things as tax.
Which one's this? Sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, this is item E.
E, thank you.
For example, in this particular instance, it was reviewed that both Daventry District Council and Rugby Borough Council have VAT thresholds for recovery. With this particular project going through in a particular year, it would actually mean that with the potential for recovering the VAT on the construction side of this, both Daventry and Rugby would actually break their thresholds and probably be in a position not to make full VAT recovery. It was reviewed, and what they actually discovered was effectively, and they implemented, was that by organising and administering this through what they call a joint committee, the joint committee in itself is an entity entitled to have a VAT deferment. And in doing this, you're in a position where, the point with the two debt councils is that if they had hit their limits, not only could they not recover the money for the construction project, they could not recover anything above it for their normal working process in the year, which could have caused significant financial problems to both authorities. By having a joint committee, the joint committee doesn't have an upper threshold. So effectively, you're in a position by going down this particular route, you can make full VAT recovery and ensure that both authorities actually have got the recovery for their normal operational work throughout the whole of that particular year. And if I were to tell you that the recovery they made doing this was £800,000 shared by both authorities, then you can begin to understand why ensuring that the organisational structure and the way it was looked at to start with was vital. And it turned what was probably a marginal return project into actually one that actually did return good. Well, it's returned good results in the short term. It has the benefit for the long term as well.
Councillor Randall, do you want to jump in the question?
Yeah, only that the wording that it need to be considered. So are you saying that in the beginning it wasn't considered?
Actually, just one point. The point is going forward. So there might be some learnings from the previous structure, but think about the future. So if you were this is a recommendation going forward. This gets wrapped up. So we're saying it needs to be considered.
In this particular instance, it needed to be considered, and there were benefits in having a variance of the administration side. It could very well be in other areas where the contracts weren't as large, where, to be perfectly honest, there wouldn't have been any need to have made that sort of recovery. So you perhaps might not have gone to the additional ways of actually setting this up, etc. It just proves it needs very careful consideration, because there comes a point after which you might want to do it later, and actually you can't do it later because you hit a point at which actually HMRC will say, actually this is purely VAT recovery process, it's not for the ongoing, and therefore you can't do it. So it's got to be part of that early preparation for doing this.
Very interesting, thank you. Councillor Rowlands, to answer your question.
Well, I know, because I was just asking it needs to be considered. Is that something that needs to be written in, or is it something that happened anyway? That's basically all.
It needs to be considered.
There's codification of the process. Councillor Paul.
I mean, the heartbreak that I've got, I mean, Chris has just mentioned, Councillor Long has just mentioned £800,000. As a trustee of the Phoenix, with the build there, it breaks my heart that a charity will have to let go somewhere in the region of £300,000 in VAT receipts. It's a heartbreaker. Unfortunately, with that one we can't get out of it, but I think there is a need for this to go forward at the beginning.
Thanks, Councillor. The fundamental principle here is that we have to protect the taxpayers' money.
Absolutely, and ensure that it's actually, if this is a legal way of returning money to the taxpayer rather than to the exchequer, then every effort should be done. At a time when the authority is hard pressed for cash, why should we give money away that we don't need to give away just by being careful?
Particularly when you look at the potential reasons for going to these ventures in the first place.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next point, Councillor.
Item F, for a project to be successful, it's vital that a project methodology is developed, agreed and implemented. I raised this particular one, Chairman, because the interviews that I held were not only with officers and members here, but also officers and members at Rugby. And there are one or two areas that I will identify as we go along where there is let's say there is a diversion of thoughts between what took place at Rugby and what took place in Daventry. And there are certain items I identified to you where even now Daventry thinks there wasn't a problem, where Rugby actually can prove there was a problem. My run through of this will identify those, but I raise it at this point in time because there are several areas where this will actually apply to.
And Councillor, in terms of shared learning, I mean, is there benefits in perhaps Rugby taking this as a scrutiny panel themselves and looking to implement the learning?
Having spoken to the senior environmental officer over there and the two members of the authority of Rugby, they are waiting for us to approve this, and they will then receive our report and take it and read it, because it's designed to be
it could be a template for any authority.
To both authorities, to be honest, and they were happy to do that, Chairman.
Excellent, thank you, Councillor. And let's move on to the next point.
Okay, I'm going to now go down to I. Whilst not specific to projects in partnership with other councils, if a project is a construction project, careful consideration needs to be given to whether a design and build project offers advantages, financial or logistical, over a separate build contract. This particular contract was actually done as a design and build contract. The actual way in which it was done, I believe, was we have a certain amount of money effectively to do this project. It went out to 3 companies to tender, and it was on the basis of design and build. Yes. And effectively it was what can you deliver for that sort of money. My background is engineering. I've been in engineering all my life. I question sometimes the value of going down a design and build project. Sometimes it's far better to go to marketplace and see the design engineers to actually say, well, this is what we are looking for in terms of specification, design it, and then go out to the construction companies afterwards and say, there's your final design, how much to build that? I think you get a far better view of actually A, what you're going to get, and B, what it's going to cost you. Now, I'm not critical in this particular instance, but what I'm saying is we went down design and build here. I believe that you should be able to go down a design, stop and build separate contract, and there may be financial benefits by doing that. It isn't always you're not always going to get the best.
It's not always the cheaper option to run.
It's not always the cheaper option, and you may very well get better advice doing it that way. So that was something else that came out.
Yeah, I was thinking of, a one-stop shop for crematoriums. You could have one with 3 ovens or 4 ovens.
Yeah.
I also, am I correct in saying that we project managed the crematorium and therefore recouped the cost of our officers on that? I'm not sure we recovered the cost of the officers on it. I think it was a portion, so it was equally spread. Right. Okay.
It was certainly everybody was happy that at the end of the day
we project managed it, and okay.
We project managed it, took that cost on board, but on the other hand, rugby took something else on board, so that effectively it's cost neutral, basically.
Yeah. Some kind of in-kind contribution to the project.
Yeah.
Very good observation. Move us on to the next one, please, Councillor.
The next part, and this is something that we were very careful of, and I was asked to take a look at quite carefully by a 151 officer and also internal audit, effectively, which is the use of procurement frameworks. Procurement frameworks generally are a way in which you can, I wouldn't say you can circumnavigate European procurement law, but to all intents and purposes you can shorten it, because if everybody's signed up to a particular framework, you don't have to go out to tender to lots of different companies. You can go to a selected number of companies that appear on that particular framework. There are a number of frameworks that are available. We went down the EMPA one because it's one that we're signed up to. I'm not in any way saying that there's anything wrong with that whatsoever, Chairman, but there are other frameworks available. And again, I would ask that my recommendations actually indicate that because we are signed up to one, doesn't mean to say that it's always going to be the best one for that particular project that we're doing. And once again, we should take on board and look and review if there are other frameworks which might be more pertinent to actually what we're trying to deliver.
Would there be an issue here about which authority had a particular framework, or is it a consistent framework across all authorities?
No, there isn't a consistent framework across all authorities. Different authorities have different frameworks. In this particular one, because we were signed up for EMPA, it was decided that we would go down it. I'm just saying there are others, and there are others that you could use which may or may not be financially beneficial, which do no harm whatsoever to explore whether they are, rather than just assume that one is going to be.
Councillor, in some respects, this is you could plot this out as a cycle, couldn't you?
Yes.
So each one of these points on the journey actually could be ordered to a point on a cycle.
Indeed.
Right away from establishing those principles, etc.
The way the report's written, Chairman, is actually, it's almost written on the basis of a critical path. It's taking you from beginning to
Start
end.
to finish.
And that's hence you are getting a cyclic approach to it.
A cyclic approach, of course, gives you the learning at the end, which takes into the next project, etc.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. And the next one, please.
Okay. Under that one, Chairman, I should have put J and K together because it's all to do with the framework side of it. I'll then move on to M. A project is undertaken for joint working. This is where I think that a little bit more consideration needs to be made. In this particular instance, neither authority has any history or experience of building crematorium, either through a constructional phase or an operational phase. We did go out, or the joint group did go out to a particular consultant who specialises in design and build of crematoria, and they were advised, but we only went out to one. As it's proven in the results, some of the information given were perhaps, I wouldn't say it was biased, but not biased in a particular way. We just didn't get a round enough opinion of what was going on. For example, it was part of the way, originally we were only going to build one cremator. Then we went to a further review part of the way through, and it was decided to put a second one in on the basis that although you were designing enough space to put a second one in, the cost of putting the second one in separately later was so much significantly higher because you've got to bring people back to site, you've got to put all sorts of things
It's kind
in.
of economies of scale at the beginning.
It was very much economies of scale. Now, on that basis, had we perhaps have gone out and consulted with 2 or 3 people who had some experience of doing this, certain elements might have come forward that only one person didn't bring forward.
Yeah. So you have potentially a very narrow view of the situation.
Narrower than I would have thought in this particular instance. Bearing in mind the cost of the project, Chairman, I would have thought a little bit more of a broader view would have been better.
Particularly at those early stages.
Yeah.
And that would be a lesson for future events.
Yes. And the second part to that, Chairman, the people we went out to were used to the principle of design, build, etc. But they didn't have quite the same experience, effectively, as then in terms of operating a crematorium. For example, Lisa, who is the crematory chaplain, was brought in probably only about 3 months before the crematorium opened. Now, she is a highly experienced lady, very sensitive to the needs of those who have lost loved ones, people who are going to use the crematorium, and I think had she have been brought in considerably earlier, then much of her thoughts in terms of the ongoing operation could actually have been incorporated into original design. It could make it much easier to use, and people wouldn't have had to have gone back in retrospect. Let me give you an example. In most crematorium, usually you have a separate entrance and a separate exit, so that to all intents and purposes you don't have a roundabout of people coming in and crossing with those going out and all the rest of it.
Production line.
Yeah, basically a production line. This is a very specific day on which a loved one is departed. It's supposed to be very special for you, not as if you're delivering something into a factory. We didn't do that. We didn't take that on board. Lisa made the comment very early on, we went to see this project halfway through, because when she was with me, that is really not the way to do this, to make it as a pleasant experience as you possibly can on the day. They have made some changes since Lisa came in. In fact, there is still the opportunity of taking another way out, and that still may yet be adopted. But it's a really good example. That's one good example.
It's getting the design correct at the beginning, I think, is the optimum
The design, yes, but also, Chairman, it's a matter of bringing the person in who understands how it operates, the thoughts of or taking into consideration the relatives, that they don't want to be on a production line, it's special to them, and you should do everything possible to make it special to them. We didn't do that in the early stages.
Councillor, these points to me illustrate a narrowness in stakeholder engagement, I think, in terms of the planning process that would need to be observed in going forward, see a broader base of people. I think there's a whole catalogue, so right from the design build, the very much kind of narrow focus of individuals in terms of the design, then in terms of missing out on stakeholder engagement at the critical stage in the project cycle. All these factors about perhaps broadening it out, seeking a more robust view. Councillor Paul.
Yeah, I think it highlights that, the fact that at the early stage, you need to bring in the end user.
Not necessarily the end user potentially, but
well, yeah, I mean the end user. In one sense, it's not economical to light an oven for one. Yeah. So you then have to have the facilities to store 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. But Chris makes a very valid point when he spoke about the person of the cloth having an input, and there is no better person and more experienced than a funeral director. And this is what I mean by the end user.
So, thank you. Councillor Long, what could they have done? I mean, we don't want to focus too heavily on this, but for future reference as a template, what can be done to broaden out the stakeholder base to get a mix of views in that are relevant?
I think in this particular answer, you need almost to you need to take a look at the project, and you almost need to consult on a wider basis. For example, we live in a world where people are getting larger. The 2 cremators which are at Rugby, one is normal size and the other one is an extended size, purely on the basis, of course, that you're getting very large people, very large coffins, and the small ones will not deal with them.
It's capacity issues potentially.
Capacity issues in terms of that, but there are other capacity issues. If you take a look at the big companies like Dignity, the overall organisation, which has about 200 or 300 funeral directors UK-wide, who also run crematorium, they're in a position whereby if one particular crematorium is overloaded with processing, if I can use that word, they actually can take coffins from one crematoria to another. They can use their furnaces to the very best. We're in a position at Daventry where we have one crematorium, we have 2 cremators, and at the end of the day we are still in a position where we have to do the very best to make the productive use of those. So you don't have too many at one time, too little at one time. Again, this is forward planning, if you like, and these are the sort of issues which I think need to be looked at to ensure that you have a broad-based view, you understand what you're doing, and you involve as many people both in the constructional phase and in the delicacies, yes. And I do bring delicacies of the operational phase where you're bringing in the bereaved, and you want to ensure that this is a very smooth process.
Excellent, thank you. Very good observation. So, take us on to any other
I would at that point just go back to remind you, Chairman, that you now begin to understand why I made the comment at the very beginning. This is not looking specifically at this project. This is looking to make broad-based recommendations for the future for other projects on looking at it in a much wider base than we have necessarily taken this one forward.
And there's a generalisation that we can take.
Yes.
Councillor Paul, you might be looking at your watch thinking, where's the time going already? I mean, did we not be finished any time soon?
I have another meeting to go to at 8 o'clock, Chairman.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm listening to. Very refreshing, actually.
Very interesting topic too.
If I then move on, I don't have too many more points, Chairman, but I think they're worthwhile. If I go on to and take them jointly, items N, O, P and Q. In this particular instance, the crematorium is based in Rugby. And what officers and members here didn't realise was actually the amount of public resistance that actually came forward for the planning applications in Rugby. It got very hot under the collar. There was some really interesting planning meetings where this came up, and when I spoke to officers here, it was, well, planning really wasn't too much of a problem. We didn't need to get members involved, etc. But if you talk to the portfolio holders at Rugby and equally the officer at Rugby, planning was a major problem. If we could have looked back, we would actually have engaged with members much earlier, got the members to consult with the residents much earlier, laid things out a lot better, and we probably wouldn't have had some of the legal or the problems that we had in getting through planning with all the upset that came with it. So here is a good example where the project is being delivered in one authority, but that authority had all the problems to deal with. We didn't see those problems, we didn't take much on board, but it really was a problem for Rugby itself. And again, I think this is an instance where, should this happen again, you need to be in a position where everybody is aware of what could happen, the problems they could have, be fully supportive for each other.
But wasn't a shared
I hasten to add, we were fully supportive of it, but we didn't have to go through those sort of problems that they did at Rugby, and it did cause some problems.
So they took the pain in many respects.
They took all the pain for that, and we just, when I say went over, I don't mean that totally, but we didn't see it. They did, and it really did give them a problem because of its location.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
We're talking about projects, so if we divide ourselves from the crematoria, then there are, as Chris has already said, many lessons to learn. There are problems with Rugby being the site, not least of all use, and also the fact that you don't want it in my backyard. And that was at the time going forward. There was also an application for another one at Willoughby, which would have caused extreme difficulty. But then you have to go back in particular to this one as to why it came forward, and the reasons why is the one that is currently in Northampton, which is used by Daventry district, is almost derelict. Obviously its life expectancy, if it's 5 years, I've probably said a lot. It's totally inefficient, small, falling down, whatever. Therefore, there could be a need for Daventry district to look for another one.
And of course, that's the point. If this is the case, we have a template here,
yes,
to work on, and some of that thinking can be carried across.
There is a second part of that, Chairman, just to add to what Councillor Paul is saying. Part of the problem comes in Rugby, where we have different cultures as well. In that, because of the Asian culture, a lot of the Asians do not want crematoria. They don't want cremating. They actually want burial. Rugby got to a point where they believed they had got enough burial space until they started doing land surveys and they started digging and suddenly found the water table had risen to a point above where they would actually dig. So it became a critical mass that they had to then change that. The principle of they had real pressure to deliver that because of ongoing requirements. The principle that they needed burial as opposed to and crematorium. that's where that all came together. So there were a number of reasons why that one came together.
Water table was an extreme contributing factor.
The interesting thing here is because different authorities are maybe adjacent to one another and have fundamental issues, but actually they can be quite complex when you start drilling down into the particular detail and idiosyncrasies.
Geographical work, all sorts of ground conditions.
Cultural aspects and so on.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference. If you go to rugby, Chairman, and you look at the sort of the ethnicity of it and everything else, it's different to Daventry. So therefore, there is a real difference between what we want and they want. However, by doing it the way we've done it, we've actually managed to tick the box for both.
Very interesting.
So there's that part to it. One other point, which is item S, and I only have two before I come to the conclusion.
Please, I'm sure committee members will be finding this very valuable as the non-committee members, please.
Item S, seeking costings for projects. I made the comment to you earlier on, Chairman, that we actually went out and we said, we have X amount of money, what can you deliver for this particular item? That's absolutely fine. And we got what we currently have. I do question, though, sometimes whether it would be, this goes back to a construction phase, design and build, or separately, whether it would have been better to actually have got the design work done and actually said, what's it going to cost? We said up front what we were prepared to pay.
Why would we do that? Why do we do that?
I think the answer to that was quite simple, was that they went with that sort of money and they tried to get the best from the market in terms of all the facilities that might come within that cost. I question whether or not it would have been better to have gone out to a design project, had the design in, and then gone back to the potential contractors and said, that's what we need, what's it going to cost?
What's it going to cost? Councillor, can you tell us, what was the... was it delivered on the budget?
It was delivered within budget, excluding the VAT. When the VAT came in, it came well under budget. It was an exceptionally good project, well managed, etc. But the VAT made the difference between hitting budget and coming well under budget.
And hence going back to the earlier point as well, of course, the critical nature.
So, but I do raise that point as to whether or not design and build and saying that's what we've got is necessarily always the better way to do it, or whether it is go with the design and see what the costs are.
See what the costs are and what they come back, but have a figure in mind about what.
You may well have a figure. Your consultant may well have come up and said it's going to cost about that, and I suspect that's probably how we got the ballpark figure to run with. I question whether that is always the best way to do it from a commercial terms point of view, having run businesses.
Absolutely. I think in my own situation, I don't know, very often that customers will say to us, here's how much we've got to spend on this project. Yeah. So we'll say, thanks, that's how much it's going to cost. Yeah. But of course there may be some deeper reasons for this.
Last one, V, we do this within Daventry, but I partly put it down from rugby's point of view in respect that when we have completed a project like this, during the course of the process of a project like this, it's very good to keep a changes and faults log, so that actually as you go through things you need to change, things that could have been done better, you log them as they happen, as you realise them. And at the end you then have a meeting of everybody concerned, you go through them and you actually produce a report which says we could have done this so much better if we'd done this and this. Working in hindsight, you can always do that, but in doing so, you have set good criteria.
Captured it as you work through the project.
Yeah, and you then have a real document to go forward with for the future and say, next time we do this, we really must take these in. You've got to learn rather than just actually let it happen and then forget it again.
Excellent, and of course, in its own right, this document does give us that opportunity. Now, finally, could you take us to the recommendations, please?
Of course. The advice and recommendations. One is that the aspects noted within the report which relate to procurement be considered in the preparation of the corporate procurement strategy 2015-18 and procurement handbook as appropriate. We're just about to review this year, and I'm looking that our comments I've just put forward are actually noted and is taken into consideration during that period. I can't turn around and say, Chairman, there are going to be financial advantages, disadvantages, but there is the real likelihood in looking at it that we could make savings and do things in a better way. I can't detail exactly what that would be.
Thank you, Councillor Long. And to make sure everybody's on the same page, literally, this is section 2.
Section 2
from page 4, advice section.
Item A, and then item B. The project management aspects noted within the report, details I've just given to you, Chairman, be considered in future revisions of Daventry District Council's project management methodology for when it comes to future projects. So everything that we've learnt from this particular project is captured, brought forward into these two documents, and therefore considered for all future projects as they come up.
And Councillor, do you think that does the job?
Yes.
You do? I think full cycle.
I am absolutely happy that by incorporating or reviewing them when those two documents are incorporated, because those are the two Bibles, if you like, then ultimately all the work we've done will be worthwhile, and hopefully it will be incorporated and used as we go forward. And I'm sure there will be other projects of that sort of joint working nature that will benefit from what we've done.
Thank you, Councillor. So you're proposing that we adopt those recommendations and then they get moved on to for the council. Before we take any, I think I will have a seconder on this one, but before we do, can we take any other further questions or comments? Councillor Paul.
One comment that I would make was regard to the log. My experience of the icon, and I'm now involved in a small way with the mind building that we are putting up at the end of Eastern Way, and using the experience of the icon, a silly thing, but it's not silly, is the data cabling. And data cabling is something that needs to be sorted at the beginning, and like whether you have one oven or two ovens, it's more cost effective to run all the data cable in at the beginning of a project. And had that log been made with the icon, then we could have carried that log forward as an advisory piece of documentation for the mind building. Having said that, we've got in at an early enough stage with the mind building for it to be, taken into account.
I think sometimes the point is a log feels like a simple document, doesn't it, which can be transported between projects, but so often, as you've highlighted there, these things get found out by happenstance.
Yeah. And it's really important, Chairman, that log is kept and dealt, almost produced on a daily basis, because it's so easy with everything going on for items to be forgotten, overlooked when it comes to the end. Produce the log as it goes along and then review it at the end for its benefits.
This feels to me like a kind of project planning, a joint project planning checklist almost.
That's what it was designed to be, Chairman. And if I may say so, it's probably the most interesting scrutiny review I think I've ever done.
Excellent, thank you. We very much appreciate it. I think it's an exemplary document, and for the sake of argument, this is the kind of scrutiny documents we should be expecting from task panel chairs, and being able to see. I think this will be very interesting when it goes with the comments through to strategy, that this is a watertight document that can withstand integrity, it holds its integrity and withstand scrutiny, I think. Let's have a seconder for this one. Sorry, Councillor Arnold, I do apologise, you've got a comment first.
No, I have got a comment.
Thank you.
I know when I was doing the scrutiny of the EMS contract, that was one thing that I made a recommendation actually about doing a sort of log as you went along, so people could pick things up at a later stage if somebody left, or that sort of thing. And I'd just like to thank Councillor Long for the report. It was a very detailed report, and it highlighted a lot of issues that needed highlighting really, and I think it'll be good going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. I think extremely well structured, very informative, and a very illuminating presentation. I'm glad you enjoyed the project.
And I'd
Thank
be
you for
happy
taking
to.
it. Councillor Randall will second that. So, Wendy, you have those recommendations. We'll take them through in their entirety as recommendations output from the committee. And everybody agreed with that one? Well, the remaining members, so Councillor Perry and myself. Agreed, Councillor Perry? Good, me too. Thank you. So, thank you very much indeed. That's excellent. Let's take the next item on the agenda, which is the scoping document from Councillor Perry. Councillor Perry, could you talk us through, just very high level, your thinking on this one, then we can move to accept it so you can start the project at last.
Yeah, this come out of the meeting we had with the portfolio holder some months back. Basically, it's just to establish what the current role of the council in improving the rural economy, and if anything more can be done in line with the corporate plan. The objectives are there. We're not looking at the economic role within Daventry Town or the town centre vision. It's basically straightforward. There's one amendment to the document. I'd initially put Councillor Frenchman down as a witness because of his role with the transport task panel.
But now you put him as a member.
As he volunteered to come on as a member, he needs to come off as a witness.
So let me just... So where does he say witness again? Just remind me.
Right down at the bottom, third one up. Under witnesses to be invited.
So I can't see him. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there he is. At the bottom. I can see the bottom, I couldn't see his name. Looking. Thank you. So, okay, great. So he's a task panel member. Good. And let me reiterate this point. Of course, task panel members can be drawn from anywhere in the council as they're not portfolio holders. And we really would like a diverse range of members. I saw Councillor Perry put an invite out there. Thank you for that. And people do have a genuine opportunity here to join this improvement process. It's a political process. So very good. And can you just, so in terms of the project cycle, you're looking to report the full completion date is the June Scrutiny Committee, with an interim report in April. Anything else you'd like to draw our attention to on that one, Councillor Perry?
No.
Thank you. Before we move to adopt that one then formally, for non-members we have a particular approach. So basically work gets scheduled onto the work programme, which is the rolling work programme. There's a document here which highlights the flow of work through the system. What then happens is we have a willing member adopt the role of chair for that particular panel, or particular assignment as I call it. Then it comes to us with a scoping document with members, like I say, can draw from anywhere. We agree, and then the task chair goes and executes the project and reports back in due course until we get a situation like this evening where Council on brings the full report for our attention. And what I also maintain, you've heard me say it's a strategy, we do have a thorough conversation about it. It doesn't come back, get rubber stamped. We have the opportunity to turn away, or say, can give us more details, or disagree with the chair. So we don't just accept it on the face of it. So
thank you for that, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Paul, and I know it's also be very useful for all of you actually as well. So good. Let's say, are we happy to accept that one and let Councillor Perry start his work? Councillor Park, are you okay with that? So I saw also that you understand the process we go through, so it's set out clearly. Thank you. So we'll add that to the rolling programme as adopted this evening. Adopted, begin to work immediately on the 10th of Feb. And Councillor Perry, we look forward to receiving that one. Also, you'll know that Scrutiny, not Scrutiny, sorry, the Councillor Frenchman being on there can help move it along. I know he's very passionate about getting some results in terms of rural transport. That's why we said we'd link them together. So, if it's, well, I think that the fact of the matter is, if it's going slow, then you can blame Councillor Frenchman because he was the one championing it. Okay? Let's move on to the next one. Are you okay down at the end there? You're clear on everything. You've got all the documents, all your bits of paper, your pencil sharpened. Yeah.
He's got the documents. If he's going, I'm trying to pinch them because I haven't got to go yet. Good.
So we're about to begin the next one. So I don't know if you wanted to stay until the hour and then duck out. It's entirely your choice. Right. Next one is communicating the corporate strategic plan. And to give you a quick background on this one, to remind you or to update those of you who haven't seen it, you saw this evening the discussions we had with the corporate plan, the clarity of the information. To make it absolutely clear, we do not have the remit in scrutiny to be able to demand the way the information is presented. We are bystanders of the data. And within that approach, we took it upon ourselves to run some work on what portfolio holders actually follow that information, and Wendy as the chair now is going to talk us through this. Okay, Wendy.
Yeah, obviously, Councillor Morgan's just give you a brief background. We found that most meetings we were actually we found a lot of it wasn't always easy to read or easy to understand, but obviously these are done to aid portfolio holders. So we interviewed the portfolio holders to see how they understood the plan, because the reason behind that was that at least if we questioned them, they would have a full understanding of what was written. One of the things that we've done numerous, you would see from our findings what sort of questions we asked, and actually it even came up tonight on one of them was target setting, and we were quite surprised that portfolio holders weren't involved in the target setting.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just interrupt just a minute? Sorry, when it's not against you. When Julie gave us the presentation and we were actually talking about the waste, she made it very clear that actually the portfolio holders had been involved in that setting, which contradicts that particular statement.
Yes, well, maybe I can make a comment on that. I don't want to get my hands too dirty on this one, but the point was, I mean, it's interesting because we've given the data anonymised, so we haven't particularly quoted any particular accounts, as you'd expect. But actually, the empirical overall impression that we got from portfolios themselves was they wasn't actively involved in setting the data, the targets. That doesn't mean to say they weren't involved, but they weren't necessarily initiating the process. And what generally people told us was they had an involvement in it, but not a very kind of, maybe I say, a leadership role in that.
I got the impression from talking to Julie there that actually it was virtually agreed with portfolio holders that those were going to be the targets. Now, that being the case, those two don't seem compatible to me.
No, but some of those targets that obviously Julie was talking about this evening are contractual targets. So actually they would have been set at that time. So, you know, that wouldn't be something that would be looked at. Would you agree on that, Tony? Is that how you see that those ones specifically were, you know, we can see they go year on year that actually the trend slightly changes and some are improving through that.
Yeah, I think specifically to the ones that come through the contract has set performance targets in the contract. Officers have presented a strategic plan to members. Members approve the priorities and the measures, and officers come back with the targets, but the targets are put through to council, but they are originated by officers. So I think that perhaps explains the process to the targets are set. I think the point I was making earlier on, specifically around the enterprise targets, is the view has been taken by management and supported by members, portfolio holders, is that we use the contractual targets.
In that case, Chairman, could I just... Sorry, no, don't... Sorry, let me try. Could we ask that actual clarifications incorporated in what we're doing, so that as it goes beyond here, actually, once again, it stands up to scrutiny in terms of we've covered that point.
I think, Councillor Long, the point was, I mean, let's go back, because we're saying the contractual, but it's how the contractual arrangements got set in the first place.
Exactly.
That's what's important, not how they're perpetuated.
Yeah.
And the question will be, when, let's take that example, when that contract was set at the time, was the portfolio holder directly involved in setting? Did they have accountability for helping set that target? So, and the feedback we got from portfolio holders, verbal, was the natural fact that wasn't generally the case. The figures were actually brought to them. But that's not necessarily, we weren't making a judgment on that.
No.
It was simply an observation.
No.
So, maybe we'll get to the point from Tony.
Yeah, if I can just come back and add a bit more clarity, hopefully, to that particular issue. I think the target within the environmental services contract, because of the nature of the way that contract was designed and bidded for, the contractors, prospective contractors, were invited to set targets. These are what we can achieve. It's almost back to design and build. This is the money. What are you going to do for that money? The contractors came forward, the bidders came forward with targets, and that was part of the tender evaluation process. That was done once at the time the contract was let.
Okay.
So
And within that particular case, you wouldn't need to have the portfolio holder having any further decision making. Really, in that position, and the portfolio holders to help drive us to meet those targets. Yeah. But so I think it's not a black and white situation, but I think for us it was the better principle.
I think the clarity is helpful. Thank you, Chairman.
Where for the sake of this case, where indeed where do you think we need to have the clarity in the document?
It was just purely the point that the point when you've got to there is where the point it should just be made clear that actually, even if you just point that it's almost horses, something vernacular, horses for courses. So you can't say it's black and white. This is what you do here. This is what you do.
Depends on the context.
It depends on the context.
Yeah, I just want to get this straight because it was just Wendy to change the document.
Sorry, Wendy, I wasn't trying to.
Chairman, if I can help, I think.
Wendy Craig changed the document.
I think you've probably got that in your first recommendation 1.
Yes, I think so. Because we haven't, I mean, because in a way, that's a good point, Tony. So, because it says here, portfolio holders should be formally and directly involved in the corporate plan target setting process and to fully agree with the corresponding officers on the targets in each corporate plan, which is, again, a bit like what you're saying there, Councillor Long. It's about that very early stage involvement.
It's just trying to produce uniformity between the preparation and the recommendations that are made, Chairman. But, sorry, Wendy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thank you.
No, that's fine. Yes, anyway.
Chairman, would you excuse me? Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure, Councillor Paul. Thank you for your contribution.
Good night.
Please come again. Councillor Randall, back to you.
Yeah, so that was the first one that actually, they wasn't actively engaged in target setting, but the general feeling was that they would like to be. So, Steve.
Yeah, I think actually, if I may use privilege here, but it's also we're not again making it's no judgment comment. It's not that they're disengaged from the process or they're excluded. It's simply that they said actually it was almost they were saying, oh no, I've never really thought about getting involved. Some of them were saying
that's the way it's always been done.
Yeah, it's exactly structuring agents. It's always been done that way. So
it almost come across as quite a surprise question, not as if saying, oh,
yeah. And I mean, the view we took it again as a cycle approach. So when it's set, if it's modified, how it's evaluated, how it's and
the other thing, like going back to historical data, was the fact that we noticed that changes were made from perhaps one quarter to another, and when we questioned about how do they go about changing the target, there seemed to be no process, and without actually, because they'll look at a plan and it's only got that one quarter on, they may not even have noticed that there had been a change in target. And obviously there have been changing targets that, as councillors.
Sure.
Actually, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Chairman.
Can I? I think. Sorry to contradict you as one of you as being your understanding. This is why I shouldn't get involved in these projects. Actually, you see what the problem. But actually, it's not changing between quarters.
It is.
It's at the end of one year and the beginning of the next cycle.
Well, we have got a change in one of ours from Q1 to now, actually.
Right. Could you point that one out for us, please, Wendy, for the sake of clarity, please?
Well, my understanding is that from Q1 on carbon dioxide, in Q1 the target was higher than the target is now.
Okay, so this is Q1 2014-15.
Yeah, but obviously you don't always notice because obviously we've got nothing to show, which again was even if that was one thing to look back on actually to see because it's not easy to see if it that was one of the questions that we said, you know, if that changed, would you know it had changed? And they went, oh, not without looking back. And obviously they didn't seem to do so much look back. It was just which it was another thing was actually on this was one why we liked the idea and we had this put on ours was obviously the direction of travel, but actually on the portfolio holders they didn't have that direction of travel on there, so we asked if they would find that helpful, which they agreed they would.
Councillor, quick comment?
Just very quickly, to deal with that one, Chairman, I mean, bear in mind these are being produced. Is it not possible? I mean, the number of changes in targets is going to be minor month from month. Is it not possible to ask them when this is produced that there is just an asterisk put down or something like that which simply says targets changed? It brings it to the attention that during the course of that period, target has changed, so we as a scrutiny can actually turn around and say, well, why have you changed it, what you changed it from, and what purpose of it?
Yes, Councillor Randall.
Yeah, and almost if you set a target at the beginning of the year, why would there be a need to change it? Because it will be a very rare case because you're either going to meet your target or you're not going to meet the target.
Well, just a simple indication that something's changed should make it easier for this committee to pick that up and then ask all the questions that Wendy's putting forward.
I think it's a fair point. I mean, I think the way we approach this is almost as professional sceptics is that if there's a change, we need to understand why there was a change. What's the story behind it? Tony, comment?
It's my understanding that there aren't target changes within the year. The targets are reviewed and set once a year at the review stage of the plan. I mean, if you've got...
I'll go and have a look. I'll go back. I'll Google it back.
That shouldn't be the case.
Thank you for that clarification, Tony. And I think we, again, a bit like Councillor Long's here, is keeping it generalised. So we've took two main data sources. That's the verbatim comments from the portfolio holders, and the reason we went to portfolio holders actually is quite clear because we were told in previous meetings that it was the portfolio holders that were happy with the way the information was presented. So with our professional sceptics heads on as scrutineers, we wanted to get their viewpoint on this. And so these are very general comments about some of the mechanism for target setting and following those.
Could I just follow that one on then, Chairman? This is from the point of view of the scrutiny committee. When this committee reviews the figures for the first quarter of the new year, that's what we do. We review target against budget. Would it not be interesting for this committee at that moment in time just to do a slightly in-depth change and see how targets have changed from the previous year to the new year and ask the questions why or what's gone on?
Councillor, I mean, I think we could, but I think in a way that isn't as robust as basically having it tracked over a period of time. Because whilst we can ask that question, I think our viewpoint on looking at this was as a bigger community, so that any councillor would have the same opportunity to track performance over a period. And actually, most importantly, the portfolio holders would not necessarily have to look back over a period because the data's in front of them.
But surely, if you went from one year to another, if for any reason, I'm not saying what it was, suddenly a target went down, isn't it right that this committee, if you're holding people to account, actually says, well, why has it gone down? Why have you lowered it? Is it the fact you didn't meet it last year, so therefore you've dropped it? You know, without doing that, Chairman, I don't think this committee is doing its job properly by challenging. Bear in mind, you're only doing it once a year. You're only doing it when you go from the end of this, let's say, 14-15 to the beginning of 15-16. It shouldn't happen after that. But that one changeover, surely that's where the data is there, and you should be saying, why has something changed? Has it gone down? If so, why has it gone down?
Yes.
What changes have you made?
I think, before I come to you, Councillor Renaud, Tony, can we make that happen? So actually all we need to do is, next time we invite Julie, as we move into the end of the first quarter of 2015-16, then we actually have a back in and we'll have both sets of data sitting out in the performance reviews and just compare and contrast.
There's no reason why you couldn't have that, but what I would point you to is your recommendations, because I think essentially that supersedes the issue.
Yes, that's okay. Thank you for that. So I tell you what we'll do, Councillor, let's keep that in mind, because actually we can have that information at that meeting.
Chairman.
Absolutely, and I'll make a note of this. So, but then we can also focus on the recommendation. So, Councillor Randall.
Yeah, that when at the beginning of the year on the corporate strategic plan, it'll come to council. It comes to council for agreement, doesn't it? So I would have thought at that time that would be more the place for the whole council. That's when we're agreeing on that, to have a report with any changes, if that was going to be the case, for it to come to everybody.
Because there are two main points that might occur. One is between years within a cycle, and the second one is between cycles. And what I think is of most concern is not between cycles, because that gets agreed in that respect, but it's within the cycle between years. That's where the problem is, and I think that's what we observed happened with some of the data that we're challenging here. So we want to make sure that's can withstand bright light, basically, it's scrutinised. So Councillor Randall, are you happy to go through the rest of the recommendations now, perhaps?
Do you want me to read through them?
Yes, please. Yeah, I think people know where we are. The benefit of this one is we've all been at those meetings where we've had a look at the corporate plan. We all know what we think about it in the back of our mind. So yeah, let's have a quick run down the recommendations and we'll take a vote.
So portfolio holders should be formally and directly involved in the corporate plan target setting process, and to fully agree with the corresponding officer on the targets in each corporate plan cycle. And basically, it's like we said, if anything goes drastically wrong, it is the portfolio holder that obviously appears in the press, so they should have a responsibility, for those targets and an understanding.
Yeah, Councillor Randall, that's not entirely what the recommendation. That's an inference, but that's not what the recommendation says. Yeah, because it's not about this infers accountability, but it's not necessarily about ongoing accountability. It's basically at that beginning process, the beginning of the cycle process. Thank you. Number two.
A procedural mechanism should be established that ensures the portfolio holders are fully and directly involved in revisions to the corporate plan and targets. So if obviously if there are changes, that they're fully involved in that and they fully understand why. Number three, a procedural mechanism should be established that ensures that where corporate plan targets are amended, it is recorded on the corporate plan and that full council is notified.
And I think, Councillor, that's the point you're making about an asterisk, some mark which distinguishes the target.
We shouldn't have to be digging it out.
No.
It should be presented.
It should be obviously.
So therefore, it's transparent and we can ask those questions.
Absolutely. And I think you actually see that was our starting point about transparency and integrity, etc. of the data.
Full council should have access to the corporate plan report, and it is recommended that this be circulated to members at each quarter for all members to view and challenge performance or raise questions.
Thank you.
Number five, corporate plan should show the performance data for the entire corporate plan cycle, so that comparisons can be made over the life cycle of the corporate plan over each 3-year period. Our recommendation is that this is presented to show full annual performance for year after year has closed, e.g. previous years, and by quarter and cumulative within the current year of each cycle. 6, at the final close out of a corporate plan cycle, the full year 3-year performance across that cycle should be shown in the most appropriate range of formats to best illustrate the performance, e.g. data, graphical presentation. Number 7, that at the end of each corporate plan year, that a consolidation of performances against the corporate plan is presented to full council for information purposes, and this is to include cumulative performance against targets for that point in the cycle, along with risks of underperformance to overall cycle target.
So hopefully that doesn't sound like gibberish, but it basically means at the beginning of the cycle you set the cycle targets, and each year you review where you are on the cumulative performance. And some of those are much more obvious where you'd have very clear data on that than others. We saw it again tonight where you were looking at data and said you were looking at the table about where we were this time last year, and you're using metrics that weren't necessarily logical and so on. It's just tell us really easy, where are you performing against this time last year on this issue that you set as a 3-year cycle item. We shouldn't have to look at loads of qualitative data in tables that comes and goes to really ascertain that.
But the whole thing, Chairman, is supposed to be transparent, and it's not.
Absolutely. I think it's not necessarily a case of obfuscation, but it's a case of it's not immediately obvious where we are. And I think that's been our contention the whole way through every meeting we've had, and particularly since I've been chair, that it's always we're having to spend too long on that particular topic at the beginning of the meeting, kind of dig out information that should be immediately obvious what it is.
Number 8, that the corporate plan be revised for all members of the corporate plan as presented to S&I, so which involves those trend arrows, and that's adopted, and that the data is subject to verification appropriate to its source and the risk of errors in each case.
So particularly for Councillor Parker, I think, and Councillor Redden, the issue here is that we might take data from alternative sources. We present it as our data, but it might not be independently verified. I think we had some concerns, in discussions historically about data coming from, particularly environmental data from sources, that we weren't entirely potentially satisfied the data was accurate, so it was an element of independent verification. A bit like you would have your auditing the accounts, etc.
If I may, Chairman, I think it's an excellent report. I'd be very happy to second it when it's proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Long. I think it's overly a competition of reports. I think yours was, probably Councillor Randall was probably envying your report still. It's still a nicer report than this one, so well done. But thank you. Do we have a proposer for that? Councillor Randall, you proposing recommendations?
I'll propose the recommendations, Chairman.
Second, Councillor Long. Thank you, Councillor Long. Thank you for your feedback and comments about it. And are we happy to adopt it? I think that basically means Councillor Parrott himself. Agreed. Thank you. So they will also go off there this evening. So beastly set of recommendations. What I would like to do actually is at this point I'm going to capture what we've done so far very quickly on the rolling work programme. So let's make sure we've got this right. So here we've got rural economic strategy is adopted this evening as a work plan. Sorry, the scoping document, yeah, it's adopted.
I don't know what you said first, so that means I finished it.
Yeah, I'm totally sure we've got the scoping document that gives absolute clarity. We've had the review of DDC procurement procedure for engaging third parties. That's got a set of recommendations. There's 2 recommendations on there this evening. And then here we've got 9 recommendations. And I think they follow the principles of, as much as possible, SMART. And I think they're very clearly cut. So thank you for that piece of work, Councillor Randall. Then, so we've got 9 on there as well, 9 recommendations, 10-2. Good, excellent. Thank you, everybody. Let's see what happens. I'm sure we'll watch with great interest how this one progresses through as it comes through the system. Let's move on to the next item, which is a review, communicated consideration of corporate complaints. Councillor Patchett. Now, Councillor Patchett's not here, he's going to give a verbal update. Is anybody speaking on his behalf this evening?
I'm going to give
Councillor Randall.
a verbal update there.
Thank you.
I actually didn't attend one of the meetings because I just totally forgot. So I did miss out on some of the work. So I apologise for that.
You're risking your life in car.
I did attend the last meeting where we done 2 interviews, just basically understanding the complaints procedure. And from that meeting, we decided that there was 2 ways now that we would actually go, is to get a snapshot of a day's, just take any day of calls to see what was coming in, and it was interesting actually on the complaints, because what you saw, what the public perceived as a complaint and what actually is perceived as a
classified as complaint.
Yeah. And a lot of the time it is very different. So we just thought we'd have a snapshot, see how it's recorded, just to get a real idea. And the other thing that we were going to look at was, I forgot what it was.
In addition to
we were going to put, the other thing that because there's been a few bits in place of slight change of the report. There's 2 things that have come through. The other, I've even forgotten what that I haven't got it with me because I didn't pick it up.
Doesn't matter.
But on the complaint procedure, or not a complaint procedure, there was something like 100,000 calls that come in. But out of that, there's only about 1,200 that actually is seen as a complaint.
Is it because it's the classification of what a complaint is? That's the fundamental issue.
It is. So obviously, to look at that, but also we thought it would be helpful to know what category those complaints are coming in. So if it is under a certain, grass cutting or whatever it may be, to actually understand and put them into some sort of column.
So it needs to be plotted and tabulated.
Yes.
Make sense out of it and creating some order.
Yes.
So this I'm very fascinated with this concept of classification of complaints. So a call comes in, you can't have 2 different people understand what makes a complaint.
No, obviously here at the call-in centre they know how to, whether it's a complaint or not a complaint. But how the public perceives what is a complaint and what isn't a complaint is often totally different. Because if a rubbish, say, take a rubbish bin, right? If a rubbish bin's overflowing and there's rubbish everywhere,
You usually do
and somebody phones in and says, I want to make a complaint. This rubbish bin hasn't been emptied. That wouldn't be a complaint, because that's just a request. The member of public out there says, well, it is a complaint because it should have been emptied as part of a service. So that's the difference in public perception of a complaint and what's deemed as a complaint once a call's been taken. If that helps you in any way.
It does in some respects. Tony?
Well, I think just to try and help clarify that, I think the issue is around whether it is a piece of work which is scheduled to be done. So if the bin is due to be emptied that day, then it is a service request and it will be done. If it should have been done the previous day and it hasn't been done, then it would be a complaint. Your service has not been delivered as expected.
Interesting.
That's the sort of, I don't sit and classify these, but that's the sort of classification issue. So, I'm sure there is further discussion to be had on this.
So that'll be an interesting debate.
So we thought it would be interesting to come in, look at a day's snapshot and actually question around, what would be seen as a complaint.
Because in a respect, even if a member of the public says I have a complaint, what they really fundamentally care about is that it's fixed, isn't it? And that it doesn't happen again.
No, but the fact is that actually we're looking at, say, we're talking about historic data. What level of this is why it'd be interesting to know what category they sit under, because I'm sure that these have escalated. Well, in fact, we know they have, because we've had to employ extra staff to deal with these. And obviously, if you expect your bin to be emptied on a certain day, unless there's a snow or something, you expect your bin to be emptied on that day. That's what you pay for. That's your service. That's your day. If it's not emptied that day, and they have to make that phone call to say my bin hasn't been emptied, You ask it, the majority of public will say, I complained about my bin not being emptied. And they're not a request to have your bin emptied because that bin should have been emptied. So it's public perception on what is a complaint and what isn't. I mean, if you're phoning in to say, can I have a new bin? Obviously that is just a request.
Well, not necessarily, because I suppose it is a request, but it might be a complaint. I guess it's quite complex. It'd be interesting to see how you make sense of it all. Do we have any questions?
Well, in determining that, the point you made there, Chairman, I mean, you're ringing in for a new bin. Why? Is it because the other one's broken? In which case it could be a complaint that it wasn't particularly good in the first place. Is it because you've just moved in, so it's a new it's a request? There is a point at which there is a fine dividing line between where you stop dividing it down.
Because you could also go crazy, quite frankly, couldn't you? I mean, surely the objective is ultimately to solve the complaint anyway.
Well, the objective is to not to get the public members so many calls coming in, actually to be highlighting issues that they see as a service. Take a misfit. I don't know how many times I've reported my bin. I live on a farm. I live on an easy road that actually they should never actually ever miss a bin. But when does it become a complaint? I could phone in this month, and I'll phone in next month, and I'll phone in next month, and they're all seen as a request. When does that become like, I am fed up now, this is a complaint, I am fed up, my bin keep being missed once?
Do you have the? I mean, I think it's basically about how you analyse the customer management system, isn't it, etc. I think probably what we find, there's a lot of work in progress, still a lot of discussion and debate. Any more insights to give us now, or do you want to basically draw a line?
No, because we're just going to, that's what we said, Kevin and I are going to spend a day and, we're going to look through, we're going to look through this and, and then we can question and quiz and...
Good. So you're still in the exploratory stage,
we are.
Understanding, making sense of it.
And then obviously looking at the process as it moves on, finding a stage 1 complaint and how that's dealt, moving up to stage 2 and stage 3.
To resolution, etc.
Can I just
Yes, please.
Only to help with this one, really. Let's just go back to recycling bins, etc. The number of recycling red bins or blue bins that you see that are broken, that they've cracked or whatever. Coming back to this particular point, people may just be ringing in to say, could I have a replacement one? Yes. Why? Is it because you've lost it? Is it been blown away? Has it fractured? Because some of them, in the cold weather we've had, have become extremely brittle. Well, if you analyse that, you might actually turn around and say, actually, we could save the council money here. The material that we're actually making these out of actually isn't totally fit for purpose. Actually, it becomes too brittle in cold weather or whatever. If you analyse it, you can actually turn around and say, perhaps we need to change the grade of plastic. You can save the council a lot of money. You might equally then help your recycling rates, because if people retain the recycling bins, or those parts of it, and they continue to use them, the number of people I know who actually don't use them because they've been broken, they've just never bothered to ask them for them to be replaced.
Is there a bigger point here actually about how, thank you Ken, about how you use data to make bigger decisions? A kind of almost like going back to a kind of ISO 9001 type approach. You take all that customer data, you understand what the complaints are, you manage the complaints you resolve, but actually you take a bigger view about what the actual issues are. Sorry, I mean,
would you like?
Yes, please.
I'm quite happy to comment on that. I think, the example Councillor Long gives is perhaps a good way to illustrate the point, that you get a call from a resident that is either a complaint or a service request, and we can argue about how we classify that. But I think the underlying issue about the boxes and the numbers of boxes that have been replaced and the life of boxes, there's enough data in the system about how many boxes we're purchasing that should enable those sorts of decisions, that sort of judgment to be made. So I don't think that hinges entirely on a complaint system. But I take the point that there is an issue about classification of complaints, and it may be there needs to be a levelling of expectation in terms of what is recorded as a complaint, or how the council sees a complaint, and how the public do. And perhaps there's a lesson for us there in communication, as well as complaints handling. So
I think it's very much down to language ultimately, isn't it? I mean, a customer might ring in and say, look, I've got an issue, but actually if it's resolved well and it doesn't happen again, then they should be happy with that. Sometimes a customer can be very happy simply with the fact something's been resolved very quickly. Sometimes people quite like to complain and say how quick it's solved. And that you take a lot of joy from having a problem solved quickly. So it's also about how you react to them.
Can I just ask one further question to Tony, Chair? Because going back to that, and it is just a point of interest, when it comes to those, do we actually ask the reasons why one of the boxes is going to be replaced?
I don't know. I don't know the detail.
It would just be.
I'll be able to
report back on that.
Would you be kind enough to do that? Because I think, believe it or not, out of a very simple question, actually leads an interesting trail right the way through to, are we making them out of the right things?
What's the problem, basically? The underlying problem. Catherine?
I would think that when somebody rings up now to have something replaced, there's a good chance they would actually say why. I had to ring up about one of my blue boxes because that had all broken, so I rang up and said, is there any chance of having a replacement because my other one is all broken? So half the time you do it automatically and tell them.
You might tell them anyway. So is that data captured, I guess, is the interesting question.
It would be quite easy to prove or disprove that, because the system leads you down the route in terms of reporting. So
you could look, basically it's learning from the complaints thing.
And it is recorded, because I recorded one last week and actually had to follow up on a complaint, but obviously she could already see, I'd reported it online, but obviously she could read my comment online and then add on to my comments.
So when you're a customer, I tell you what, I think the best thing to do, we can talk about it now, but we understand where you're on the problem. Give us the full report and we can have a good hearted discussion about it and understand the process for ourselves. But obviously, as with all this, we're looking at what the performance issue is.
Just ask a question of Tony, but I'm interested on this complaint stroke request. When those calls initially come in, are they recorded as a request or a complaint? Are they recorded that they're resolved at that first contact?
If they are resolved at that first contact, then I would expect that to be the case. I mean, we have a CRM system which sets out, records, whoever takes a call will record the basic data, the nature of the issue, complaint, inquiry, whatever it is, and the action taken. So there should be a resolution, or if it escalates to another step or the next step in the process. It's all mapped through the...
it was just interesting because I'm on the panel, but I missed the last meeting because, like Wendy, I forgot about it. Well, you'd forgot the one before. And I've just seen how it goes in the system, because the way I would see a process working, whatever process you have, is first point of contact. Is it resolved, whether it's a complaint or a service request? Because if they've done a service request and they phone a second time, then it's a complaint. And that would be the first stage of a complaint.
Thank you. Can I actually, what I'd like to do, I'd like to draw a line with this discussion, because I think what you're talking about here is a kind of process and a procedure for mapping things out. I think we mustn't lose sight of the fact what we're looking at is the performance issues at the heart of this. So Wendy can come back to us with, obviously Councillor Paget, a very good document which tells us how it works, and then if there are any issues currently, where the issues are. So I think we could get into a very good discussion about conjecture, but probably very useful.
Can I please just interrupt and say I'm sorry? I've got to go. I'm supposed to be meeting my husband at 1:30. I was going by how long S&I used to last when I was on it when Chris was chair. And I know, I think we would have been finished. So I'm
It's not a complaint about you, Chairman.
No, it's not. No, it's not. You've got a long agenda.
You have to have a 3-course meal before you start to these meetings now.
I'm sorry, I did think that...
It's not my job to make apologies. I don't make any apologies. We have a thorough discussion. We make sensible decisions.
I'm not... No,
but thank you for the observation, Catherine.
To be honest, I would like to stop, but if you're trying to ring through to say, where am I?
Can you come back at 9 with sufficient shit?
Thank you very much. Good evening. Let's thank you for that one. Let's move on now to the rolling work programme. You can see it all. It's very straightforward, mapped out. Again, for actually, it's only you know, Councillor Parker, but very, very straightforward. This is our table of activity in the year. What we do in terms of our own transparency, you can see on the left-hand side the column is assignment number, and they're numbered when they're in operation. What we do is they go. The objective is to get them green on those scope approved to the right, and we basically watch it through the process as it evolves, so we can keep a track on things ourselves and demonstrate our value to the council. And once they're green, they move into the following year. Then we remove them from the list. Job done. We basically hand it over from here to the officers to make a recommendation with the portfolio audit strategy, and off it goes. So you can see the workflow there. Today we've added extra items to 10, 11 and 12. This is members' opportunity to see if there's any other work you'd like to put on the programme, and if there's anything you'd like to adopt. I would note one piece of caution: we are in February already, which means anything coming out in a scoping document will reach us till April, but you're quite welcome to put something forward if you wish, or you could do it at the subsequent meeting. Councillor Randall, I'm conscious that you're working on one, Councillor Patchett, but you're more than welcome to put one forward. Councillor Perry, you've got one. Councillor Long, you've just finished. So it's entirely anything you want to put forward which requires some level of scrutiny.
This moment in time.
Councillor Long, you put it on rest.
My comment at this moment in time, Chairman, was very simply, I know that the committee is apolitical, life is going to be extremely busy over the coming weeks and months. Would it not be better to actually delay anything further until you get into the new council year? And if you have new other members, then there may be other items to take on board early at that stage.
Perhaps we just give Councillor Randall more work, I don't know.
Excellent.
That's apolitical, isn't it? Councillor Randall, comment.
I've lost my bit of paper.
Councillor Randall, I'm not sure to give Councillor Randall one or not, really.
No, right, okay. No, what I was going to say was, often what we've previously done is, if we've got any suggestions, is actually
we add them to the programme.
We add them to the programme and then look at them after elections.
So do you have a recommendation? And perhaps it's a very good point. We have got the general election coming up.
Because we don't want to start with nothing, a blank sheet. We like to actually start that first meeting with a discussion on what we're going to move forward.
Absolutely, thank you. And we also have, of course, 2 that have got to come back to us already. So do you want to add something in as to cue it up, Councillor Randall? No, we don't have to. I think we've had a good programme this evening. We've got a couple going forward. I think we have got an election coming. I think we're mindful of that.
It may be actually that things come out of doing a bit of canvassing. Then we might find
absolutely. We'll keep open minds, and of course, any members are welcome to bring it back. Okay, so we've got it as it is. I'll be very keen to move those 2 through anyway, and then we can regroup, and when we have April, again, if there's anything burning, we can have a look at it. But let's see, particularly on yours, Councillor Randall, that you and Councillor Patrick bring it forward for April. So again, we have momentum in the programme. Let's now, I think, move on therefore to action and implementation, which is where we invite Tony to give us an update on the panel. So A, B and C, plain English, public engagement, rural transport.
Yes, just setting out where we are with the task panels that have completed and gone through council. The plain English task panel, that is largely delivered. We have a survey to go out, which is the first recommendation in June. The rest of the work is either delivered or is in train now.
The plain English being number 5, isn't it? Panel number, assignment number 5 with the unique reference number. Review of formal written formal communication. That one, isn't it?
In plain English, known as the plain English test panel.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Also known as the plain English panel. The orange is not lost on me. Thank you. So let me just line these up. So what have we got to put in there? So Tony, just start again, please. I managed to get myself confused.
So we have 5 recommendations, 2 are completed,
Ah, right, okay. Yeah.
2 are in train, and the 5th one is will happen in June because it's a timed event.
Got it, thank you. So we've got item number 2 on your report you've given us is green, and then item number 4 is green.
Yeah.
So let's take those as completed. So if I say for number 5, review of football communications, that there are 2 that are green and 2 that are orange and 1 that is, what did you say, Tony, again? It's nothing. What's the deal there again?
2 green, 2 amber, and the one is, it's shown white as on the plan because it hasn't, there is a targeted time scale and we haven't yet achieved that time scale, so we can't deliver. I mean,
What does that mean? I mean, what colour is it on a red, amber, green? I mean, we don't, this doesn't say red, amber, green, no colour.
well, in amber then, because it hasn't failed its target.
On your classification?
My classification.
Okay, so we'll say 2 at green, 3 at orange at today's date. That's how we record it on here for our own monitoring purposes. See how complicated life is when you start monitoring. It's Kirsten Randall.
Do we have a review date on here at all? You know, often that we say we go back and look at them within sort of 6 months or whenever it may be.
Yes, well, we haven't set one actually, but I think it's completely up to us if we want to review anything, particularly if we've set a date on it. I mean, the most obvious one there is the review of AME performance. And again, don't forget we have got an opportunity to invite a portfolio holder into the next meeting. That might be an ideal opportunity to count that as a review. So let's first of all, let's get rid of, Tony, we can get rid of your plain English one, okay?
Okay, we're going on to the public engagement task panel.
So this is item number 6, the quality of public engagement.
That's correct.
Just making sure we've got consistent terminology so don't put it in the wrong place. And here we've got
4 recommendations.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Are they all orange?
Yeah, by the criteria we applied to the last one, they were all and amber, I think. Is
Amber. Sorry, yes, red, amber, green. Do apologise. Brag. So this one is 4 at amber. They're not doing this because they've got this document anyway. Are we all happy with that? Yep. Councillor Randall?
No, all I'm just saying is, no, when we're looking at these, perhaps we could have an extra column with a review date.
Oh, sorry, you mean for this?
Yeah. To
Oh,
go
right.
back, you know, to sort of review them back, and it'd even be like on one of them, like to further, grow the people's panel, and actually that should be out in June. So if we reviewed it in 6 months to see how it had grown, or whether those recommendations had made a difference, or
Yeah, I mean,
because often we review after 6 months. We shouldn't just do it and not review it, should we?
well, I mean, other members can have a comment. As a chair, I think you're in danger of getting weighed down by a bigger and bigger town in the past if you're not careful. I think our job should always be to say, let's have a look and poke our nose into the things that are very important always. I mean, some of those will be important, but we could always, if we so chose to look at them, say, just, there's a great opportunity, Tony's here, rather than making it over formal, saying, Tony, what's happening here? Or if we think there's a bigger issue still, relaunch an inquiry, maybe.
Perhaps I can offer a way forward is, at the point these become all green, then you have an opportunity then to say, let's look at this in its entirety, or look at a particular recommendation and then add it to the work programme as a new piece of work. Really.
I think so. Yeah, I think because otherwise you're never going to let go of it.
No.
And we have to, we can't keep going over the same turf.
Yeah, I mean, if I could, I mean, when I sat in your chair some while ago, one of the complaints that was levied was the fact that Scrutiny did work. And it came up with recommendations.
Scrutiny what, sorry?
Scrutiny did work and made recommendations. But that, in the early days, we never ever went back and checked whether it had been implemented, what had been done about it. So in my time, we always had a 1-year review Which it was not a rework of the scrutiny that we'd done. It was just simply, those were the recommendations. What happened? Were they taken on board? What was the outcome of it? It was one very small piece of work, but we always reviewed it. Once we were past that 1 year mark,
yes,
it died. It was finished. But there was always the point, and I suppose in some respects it goes back to portfolio holders. It was very much a matter of, you can't just let this go through and that's the end of it. Actually, in a year's time, it will come back. We will ask the question what you've done with it. And it was actually benefiting members of Scrutiny to say, actually, my time has been worthwhile. Something has come out of it rather than being open-ended. But I do stress, you're not reworking the scrutiny.
Yes, absolutely.
You're just checking the recommendations are applied.
Before we come to Tony, because in a way, the way we tracked it here, we basically said, whilst our responsibility ends once it leaves this committee, this is why we have this particular extra couple of modules on where we track it through the full council, and then Tony comes back so we already have that mechanism in place anyway.
But it's beyond that, Chair. Once council adopted it, then 12 months later or 6 months, whichever you choose to be, it used to be 12, and we used to take a look at the recommendations and say, scrutiny put it through, what happened? Because it would be very easy to bury it otherwise if you didn't come back and check that. And it's not that amount of work.
No.
Just to review that quickly.
But is it actually not the fact that we're already doing that when we look at them being implemented? The implementing is the test. Because some of these actually, as we know, look at the review of leisure facility. That was fully implemented that actually took a year between the scope approval and the full implementation.
But implementation is one thing, Chairman. Reviewing it 12 months later, different. Because you could review it, but you could kill it in a week.
Of course.
What actually happened during the course of that year? Did something come out of it, even though it was implemented?
Let's get Tony's comment first.
Well, I think actually it's in the first part is were the recommendations implemented, and through these action plans and the rolling work programme, we're plotting that. So the recommendation leaves S&I, goes to strategy group, goes to council makes recommendations. What this document does is plots the delivery of those recommendations. So I think in that sense there is an audit trail. I think where we're moving on to now in your later comments is about the effectiveness of those, and that is a different question. This document doesn't do that, and I think that presents a different challenge for you as a committee.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, before I come to Councillor, the point is you could. I totally agree with what you're saying, but I wonder at such a point you're always looking, because the tail gets longer as you go through. So maybe you get to a situation, maybe it's a simple tip box, we don't want to look at that, here's all the projects we've done, and let's go and have a look back at some of those. And that could be, it could almost have an agenda, is there anything we want to go back and look at? But actually be project based on it rather than take a...
But there's no reason, Chairman, why you can't turn around and say, we will review it at 12 months. You could apply the tick box, you could turn around and say, it's very clear and very obvious, it's been done. Yeah. But at least there is that moment in time that says, we did all the work that Tony's put down, and that is the point at which we say, yeah, it was done, fine, final sign-off, or whatever. Or you say, well, actually, it didn't. Why didn't it? Let's put it back in the programme and find out what went on. You'd be very selective of what you did, but you would always ensure that the work you did was followed through for that period of time, and you understood the work, the actual benefits of what Scrutiny's recommendations were.
But let's just get this clear, because we already have the fact that recommendations have been implemented.
Yes.
Now, is it the case that you're suggesting we have to go and test the way it's been implemented? That takes a piece of work itself, doesn't it?
Just a review. Are you happy with it? If you're not happy with it, then you would go and test it. You don't have to do every one.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like the People's Panel, we could go out and we could do a draft survey, and actually we could increase it by 50%, and I'd look at it, say in 12 months' time to say, through that piece of work we did only have 350, and we've now got 800 people. So I'd just report back that, yes, I've looked at that, implemented that, we've now more than doubled it by 50%.
So okay, thank you. So let's have a look at this from the way you'd approach the work. how would you actually do that? So we have this meeting, we say, right, we want to, then you still have to assign somebody then to go away and look at the work again.
Yeah, well, I'd quite happy that it should either be
The original chairperson.
I don't
Yeah,
think,
or-
I
or
don't
if
think
it-
it's a
or if-
lot of work, actually.
I think it's a lot of work.
I don't think it is, because the original chairman of the task panel will just basically spend half an hour with perhaps the officer who's implemented and just talk it through and just refresh himself. It's just a review.
It's
If you
not
take- if you take
simple,
my-
is it? Because you'd be looking for evidence that it's been implemented.
Yeah.
But if you were to take my report tonight, Chairman, to
Yeah.
you, what we're going to take forward, in a year's time, if it comes back to me, all I have to do is go and talk to Simon Bowers or something like that and say, well, that's what we did. The procurement documents, etc., were due to be reviewed. Were they reviewed? Was it incorporated, or did you at least look for it? And as Kevin said, it might be one 15-20 minute meeting where you've got the assurances. I could come back then and say, yep, went to talk to them, it's been totally done, or no, it hasn't, and I wonder why it hasn't been done. The number of times I suspect you're going to get subsequent work out of it is probably quite small, because we do have a history of taking on board and working with what we implement. But at least by leaving a point in time that says we will look at it, however cursory or in detail, it means it's still there to be
So
looked
this
at.
is-
It's almost an aid to memory that effectively we've got to just take a quick look at it.
This could potentially be what, a 12-year post-implementation audit.
12 months.
12 months, not 12 years.
Does it 12
year
years?
one?
I didn't tell you this right yesterday. Yesterday I went to Switzerland and back in a day. And I think it's showing now. So totally sorry.
Well, I think just using the example Councillor Long posted, about the recommendations that are for consideration in the review of the procurement process, that won't be reported back to this committee. Assuming Council approves that recommendation, no reason to think why they wouldn't, that will then set an action for officers to go through that process. That will stay on an action plan here, amber or red, until it becomes green. It will be reported back here as done. So the actual implementation of the action will be recorded. That's already within the process. What it doesn't do is take a view on how effective that implementation is. So I think if you're wanting to revisit the issue and say, we made this recommendation, something's changed, is it effective? Then there's nothing within the process as we have it at the moment that will do that.
Yes.
But if it's just the audit trail as to whether something was done, that is there.
Thank you, Tony.
Got the audit trail, but I mean...
Oh, 1 second. Councillor.
Yeah, if I may, I agree with what Councillor Long is saying, and with what Tony's saying in a way. You've got to do that because you don't know if the recommendations you've done actually are working, are worthwhile. Did it set out? Have you achieved it? If you don't do that, you don't square the circle. Absolutely. You're missing something, and it's corrective action. It's just normal stuff. You have to go back and check, and it's absolutely right. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long at all.
Well, let's have a look at this. I mean, so I understand this is a continuous learning approach that you're taking, Councillor. I understand that, but it's also when I don't entirely agree with your point there, actually, because you can say, when does a scrutiny assignment end? And if you are always looking back over the last couple of years, are you also using the team's resources effectively? Now, if you always come to these meetings and have a very good willing group saying, yeah, I'll go and have a look, you still have to have some parameters by which you review a project. And my experience is, when you've had members here this evening, quite frankly, saying you've forgotten to turn up at meetings, now maybe that's an issue for me to manage, but actually, if we want to do it, we can basically adopt an approach where we put an extra column on here and simply say it's had a 1 year post-implementation review. and then we'll be looking for each time we can. So the next one's, let's look at this logically. If we start this time round, the first one would be up for review. Would be review of leisure facilities, actually, which is I know when you were on council on that fully implemented. We reviewed that here July 2014. So that would be a case where we'd go back through the recommendations and look if they've been implemented. If they've been, I don't mind. We can set that if we think that's the right thing to do.
A little bit more context to this, Jim.
Yeah.
When I was in your position, we had a problem. We had a problem of morale within members of Daventry District Council. And that problem effectively was, why should we waste our time doing scrutiny reviews when nothing gets done? The simple way to overcome why should you do it, and it did work, it did reverse it, it did make people take an interest, was the fact that in 12 months, at that stage, the reviews were open-ended. You did it, it went away, nothing got done. So, well, why should I waste my time working for scrutiny to put a report that's nothing's going to happen? Simply by putting a 12-month review on, it said to members, actually, we are going to check that it's going to be done. Our work has going to be valued, and people started taking more interest in scrutiny again.
Okay, sweet. Thank you for that.
But if you put that against the background, there is a point that says members' time is valuable. Members want to know that if they're willing and prepared to put the time into working for scrutiny, something's going to be done about it. I maintain by having the 12-month review, that's what you're telling them, we are going to make sure that happens. If you don't do it, it becomes open-ended and there is the real risk you go back again to people say, well, why should I bother?
I think it's. I think we're in a slightly different place to them because obviously we do track it. But I mean, look, we can add the column if members of the committee say, well, let's take Councillor Perry's comment, the last comment on the subject.
Yeah, I would say just during the task panel on empty homes, which we know they all got implemented. But if you'd have had the 12 month, it might have been a 2-year review, whatever. You might have it flexible depending on the task. The crux of the matter we looked at there was solving or trying to solve a problem. But there's been no data come back to say at all there's a problem. It's only if someone decides to pick up that cherry. So if you have that review and just have the chance to go in and talk to the finance people, etc., and say, you know, since we've done this task panel, what's been the outcome? We've implemented the thing. We can soon, in 20 minutes, we'll soon find out the answer.
I think you're underestimating this 20 minutes we're liking. It's not that simple to do it in 20 minutes. You're not going to find the answer in 20 minutes.
Well, I'm judging by the chair of the committee and the length of time. Probably not. It depends how detailed.
No, if you're going to do it properly, you're not going to have a 20-minute conversation. You need to find evidence properly.
No, you have that conversation to see whether it's been effective. You don't need a lot of evidence because then you'd come back, you've reviewed it and you say, yes, everything's tickety-boo. If it's not, then you might want to then add it back onto the work programme to look at it again, to take the initial report and then look at what else you can do or not you might end up. That's where the work comes in. But if you don't have that initial small look, review and a thing, we don't know if we've solved the problem until somebody shouts, my bin hasn't been emptied. That's the only time you know there's a problem on some of the issues. And taking that task panel, we don't get any figures, so we can't review it unless we were to go and ask, which is effectively the same as reviewing it.
I think what we're having here is almost a conversation, an existential conversation about the purpose of scrutiny. I think, look, if we can agree this as a team. If we want to put a column on there, which is our alert to say, 1 year after implementation, we'll go and review it, and we can have that in our discussion of the running work programme. We can say basically, and then you have to come back. So let's take an example of this good word. So at the nearest meeting to the July meeting, let's call it the June meeting, we'll task and assign the task to a member to go away and review the recommendations and how they've been implemented. But let's do it properly. Let's not just say it's no disrespect to officers. But it's not a simple conversation with Bob, the officer, by saying, has it been implemented? Yes, it has. I think we need to dig a bit deeper. I'm not saying turn it into a huge project, but you do need to see some evidence that it's been implemented.
I would like to propose that we do that, Chairman.
Thank you. And are we just happy to adopt that? Seconder? Okay, so let's be absolutely clear now. I've got a proposal and seconder. What we're looking to do is add a column on, which is a 12-month review post-implementation. That is, once it's gone green, from that date of the scrutiny of it. So Tony comes back, he said that's now been fully implemented for that particular activity. 12 months later, so the next one up will be leisure facility. Let's start with this particular panel. And then at the June meeting, we'll assign a member to go away and have a quick review of that. Quick, but not 20 minutes quick.
Can I just raise,
Yeah.
say that it's already been done because that was a post-implementation review.
Well, here's this where you come to classification. It's a post-implementation review, that's right, but there were recommendations. So we're looking at the implementation of the recommendations. Okay, so that's what we'll do. With that, in due respect, we'll also add a stage onto the process as well. Okay, good. So happy with that, everybody? Yeah? So, I'll add a column. And then from the June meeting, we'll be looking for a volunteer to go away and take that. Logically, it's the chair, but we know things move on. So it'll be one of the members of the panel. Okay, good.
Let's say the beauty of it is, Chairman, is you're not reviewing the scrutiny, you're purely looking at the recommendations. So
You're only looking at the recommendations, yeah. So 1 year on, recommendations. But I think we also need to be clear. There's a difference between implementation, has the implementation stuck, and the effectiveness. So how do you start evaluating the effectiveness? Because then you start to go back in a bit more. So I think what I would suggest is between now and then we also need to give that some more consideration about how to be applied. Because if you're not consistent in the methodology, you're going to get all sorts of different things coming back.
could be an interesting agenda item for another meeting, Chairman, where we can debate it in greater depth.
Let's do that. Let's add that to the next meeting because we're going to be a bit lower on time to come back. So, Wendy, can you add that to the list for the next agenda, please? Good idea. Thank you. So, April meeting, agenda item. How to review on-year implementation. So let's have some thoughts on that. Thank you.
Actually, Chairman, so just to add a bit to that one.
Just before you take that, Simon, what's the time limit? I always forget this. 9:15. Yeah.
Simple. Just to add on to that bit, when we do that, Chairman, take a look at the one that is the review that's going to come up.
Yes. And let's have a
take
look
the
at
actual
that.
live item and decide how we are going to review it. Particular
Yeah, we
item,
use
then
it
we can
as
all
a case
agree.
study.
Exactly.
Yeah. Could when do we also have the recommendations from that? In fact, can we have the full report back in the next minutes? The next agenda, so we can actually go and review it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Very good idea.
So, Chairman, just at the risk of prolonging this,
Just so you what it
you
was.
may want to consider inviting the task panel chairman at the time he
Councillor
presented that report.
Yeah.
Who, remembering, I think it was Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah. Good idea. Yeah. Yeah, to see how she'd like to see it to know, and she may want to do it herself. Yeah, let's do that as well. But see if we can please invite Councillor next time. So, great. Good. That's a good discussion. Kept our workflow going. We had a good hearty discussion about it and we agreed. Good. Let's move on to the next item. Actually, Tony, I don't think we finished with you yet. Sorry,
I think we're on item C, which is the Rural Transport Task Panel.
Nearly got away with it. Rural Task Transport.
Which two recommendations, and our Amber has
Both red and green.
which shows some work's beginning to happen, but essentially the strategy will come back in December.
Thank you. So to December.
So it was 12. The council recommendation was 12 months, or within 12 months of the. There's a link into the rural
Absolutely, which is Councillor Perry's team.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question, because you've got this where it says action funding proposal for consultancy support. Is that based on transport, or is that including economic? Because you're assuming that the task panel might recommend spending.
I'm not sure the detail of that. I mean, it's something that Simon Bowles has put together, and I think there's been some further discussion since this action plan was
Was that a question to ask you?
I think that might feed into your report anyway. So you go out, take anything you need, and we'd like to see a good. Basically, we know Councillor Frenchman was very passionate about this at the meeting. He's just a bit. We're all very passionate, and we've basically given it to you and him to bring back again as a full document. Drive through. How you manage your team is fine. It's up to you. Good. So that's the running work programme. A very good conversation. I think Councillor for initiating it. No resistance on my part. I just honest again to this trap. I think it's just a quick 20-minute job. I want it done properly. You can see this is the management systems auditor in there. Let's go to the next item. Thank you for that, Tony. There is a document which you saw in your pack, the Northamptonshire Bus Services Scrutiny Review, done by the County Council. You can see it's very nice. You had a nice picture of the chair. So I wonder if we should start putting pictures of ourselves in our documents. Probably a lesson there.
I might do that.
Why not? Why not? It's a nice idea, isn't it?
It's nice when you look back and you think, oh God, I remember him 20 years ago.
So I like our documents clearly, but this goes a step level. This has got its whole design. You've got a nice introduction, etc. But basically, is there anything anybody wants to raise on the content, or perhaps again it feeds into Councillor Perry's project just as a bit of extra detail, or is it simply that it's moved to Councillor?
Yeah, I went to a stagecoach when they were doing a new launch on a bus service, and actually it's picked up on one of the things that they had concerns over, and it was to do with planning and not being consulted on, which was picked up. So I was quite pleased to see that actually.
They've done a good job, I paid you, didn't they?
I did think that they did. Yeah, I did.
Chairman, I don't know whether it's necessary. I will make the declaration, you can decide. The author of the report and I sit together on a board of directors of a company over in Corby. So, just from a point of view of whether I need to or not, I don't know, but Bob and I sit together, so I'd rather overdo it than underdo it.
Absolutely, thank you. So you know he's a handsome chap then. Okay, so
I wouldn't say that. He's a nice guy.
Excellent. So any other comments on this, or is it simply a case that we've circulated, it was noted, particularly in terms of how it dovetails into the projects and stuff?
I just wondered whether they took into account Councillor Frenchman's task panel report.
It's a good question, isn't it? And I think it kind of basically links into the conversation we had earlier about authorities learning from each other's scrutiny panels and so on. I mean, the interesting way that I came to know about this myself is because we had when we go to our scrutiny networks, and actually Councillor Long, maybe you're both at this one where this was mentioned, and I got the representative from the council to send it along to us. And obviously wanted to circulate it for your information as well.
I do think, what you said about the photos, I think generally we do these reports and they go through the council system. But I do think it would be useful if there was a few, I wouldn't say hardback copies, which could be used to publicise the work of the S9 committee. So, you could hand one to the press when they pick up something about a report or some meeting they've been to, so they've got the background of that report. It wouldn't necessarily cost a lot, but I like this because straight away, if you're interested in it, you pick it up and read it. Just to have an agenda meeting.
Once upon a time, Chairman, before you were a district councillor, we had a county-wide scrutiny board, which I chaired. And we used to have two members from all the boroughs in Northampton, East Northants, South Northants, Northampton Borough, Kettering, Corby, and we used to take a particular subject, one which was common to all of us, and we would actually do a scrutiny that effectively covered the county. Why do it 4, 6, 7 times if you do it once? But the point I was trying to make, and taking on Kevin's point, was actually we used to interchange scrutiny reports so that we could, it may not necessarily be exactly what we wanted, but we could see what Kettering had done or what Corby had done. And even if it sometimes gave you the bicycle wheel, and if you put your own spokes into it, if you like. Yeah. But it really worked extremely well. It was a great shame. It was a great shame when it didn't continue to work.
And I think the nearest probably we have to that now is the much bigger region, isn't it, with the Scrutiny network for the East Midlands?
Yeah,
it is East Midlands actually. Yeah, it is.
I mean, I think there's a useful thing with the parish councils and town councils, because sometimes you want to go to them for info, but you don't necessarily go back. So it'd be nice if, when you have the parish meeting, once a year or twice a year or whatever, a few of those could be on the back so they can pick them up. They see what's being done by the S&I committee, etc. It just publicises it, and hopefully it looks for it and gets some of the parish councils to think about other opportunities.
I think it's a good idea. I do think there's pros and cons. I would have said actually the one thing you have to do then is we probably have to write consistently. They're putting some more design applied. We'd obviously have to have some extra budget for this, etc. But it's certainly something we can perhaps have a look at. Perhaps I'm not saying we need a scrutiny panel to look at it, but I think perhaps Tony, can we have a talk about that in our pre-meeting next time, and then we can perhaps bring some concepts back, see what opportunities there are maybe for taking not all of them necessarily, but perhaps some
hopefully, if you agree to write all the reports, we'll just tell you what to write, and they'll all look the same.
Yeah, I think it's about more than that. It's also about the design and maybe let's go. I'm going to do it on my laptop.
Styling, Chairman.
It's the look and feel of the report, and I think this might be where you'd need extra support from officers, etc.
There was a leaflet. I don't know if it was your time, Chris, where it advertised the S&I.
Yeah, it's still around, I think.
But of course, as a chair, there's nothing stopping you from promoting your scrutiny as long as you do it. I mean, look at Councillor Andrew often has done in the past. And again, if you need to draw an extra attention, then please go and do that. Basically, as long as it's for, there's a proper purpose and objective behind it. So I know when you've looked at yours about raising awareness of a topical issue, etc., it might elicit a bit of feedback and so on. So, look, it's your panel. How you treat it is yours, but we'll have a look at the outcome. It's not time already. Well, let's get a quick extension. We haven't got long actually, but let's. Oh God, we have got long. Sorry, Tony.
If it helps, Chairman, I don't envisage spending more than 10 minutes presenting to you. It depends on
no, absolutely.
how much engagement you want to.
Can I go at this point? Because you've met my Jack Russell, I think he needs his pedigree chopped.
I've sat in a meeting with your Jack Russell. Look, if you want to go, I think there's... actually, no, before you go, can I just get you to look at one more quick thing? So let's have an extension. We okay with that, everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go on to, very quickly, the next agenda item, which is the workflow. You'll see in your document there's a workflow here. There's some new items been added. This is basically to look at what happens when it comes back before it goes to strategy, about having a courtesy to have it look at the S&I chairs. That's obviously me at the moment. And it's a step that we put in also in this to strategy report to include tabular response to S&I recommendations. If you remember, that's when it's a strategy, so we can see how it's being considered, and that's documented, it's articulated in the report so everybody can take consideration of it. And again, it's all about strengthening up our presentation of our material. Are we happy to adopt this?
Indeed, yes, Chairman.
Yeah. Any comments, concerns?
No, it's good. It needs adopting.
I did wonder what colour the arrows are going to be in.
They're just kind of standard colour, I think. But what we'll also do is the next meeting we're going to have some more augmentation on it. But at this point we've adopted it as is. Thank you. So adopted as is. Great, thank you for that. Let's now, Councillor Perry, you're more than welcome to go through reuniting with your dog, if you so choose.
I do choose. You might ignore the setting leg.
I don't know what's better, being with us or being with a dog.
Well, I noticed you were a little bit wary of it.
I'm not pro-dog really, but every man to his own best friends. So, are you okay to present to us today?
I'm quite happy to present. Sorry, am I in your...
No, I'll just move back a little bit.
Okay, just to remind you that there was a brief discussion last time around the potential for some scrutiny work on electoral registration, and it was felt that you needed some better understanding of the electoral registration process before you were able to make that judgment. So that's the context for this presentation. As I mentioned, it's fairly short. I think there's 6 or 7 slides. And there's not a lot of text on them as well, which I'm sure you'll be pleased to know. So just intention is just take you a quick whiz through electoral registration. So the big issue for us is we are halfway through a transition to individual electoral registration. So the way people register is changing. It's a government-led change. We've been involved in this process for just over 12 months now, and it won't fully roll out until 2016. The fundamental change is that the previous system had the head of the household, whoever that individual may have been, was responsible for registering those who should be on the register within that household. The change is now to move that to each individual, so each individual will be responsible for their own registration, and there's some great detail required, including national insurance numbers and date of birth, where essentially it was names and addresses previously. The benefits of IER, the government tell us, modernised electoral registration system, increased accessibility, online registration, which is a key part of the new system, which wasn't within the old system, improved integrity, reduction in fraud and perception of fraud. Every applicant will have their identity verified or confirmed, so there's a checking process. Improvement in the completeness of accuracy of the register, and a greater sense of personal responsibility.
Tony, sorry to interrupt already. Is there a standard database that will be used across the country for this? How will data be managed?
Well, each authority is responsible for compiling its own register. The checks are done against the Department of Work and Pensions systems, and that is the key check. And I'll come on to that. So the transition programme, I mean, it's just key sort of part of that process. So started back in July last year, where we had what we called a dry run, an implementation dry run. So we ran well, it was a full check, but it wasn't used for anything other than to see whether the system worked and what the results it threw out. So implementation, all new registrations must be IER from July last year, and were matched against the DWP. And those that weren't matched are then asked to re-register. So that happened in July last year. I've got a slide later on which talks about the results of that for as far as we were concerned. And then the registration process began after that in October. The reason for the gap was there was a phase rollout across the country. So the write-out begins, so we've got our register through the matching process, but then we're starting then to seek confirmation, so it's confirming the information that's on there. And the key bit of paper that goes around is a household inquiry form, which fundamentally is not that much different to the old canvas form to the head of each household. Establishes who's in each household, and from that information we can then seek to register individuals. So December 14 is the first register that was published under IER. Anybody who'd not confirmed, who had not or had not applied to be registered, was carried forward onto the new register. So nobody was lost off the register, but they're not fully matched on the new register, but they're still on the register. Moving on, the post-general election, we will carry out a full canvass again later this year, and all carry-forward electors, so everybody who's been carried forward will be invited to apply for the next run of the register under the IER process. And December 15, the new register is published, and those who haven't confirmed will then fall off the register, but not until that point. And I'll come back. I mean, that's my final word actually in this presentation, but to repeat that. So I hope you can see the bottom of the screen. It's just about gets on there. So what did it mean for us in terms of that process? The dry run matching, which was July 13. I missed a step on the previous slide. We first looked at this July 13, did our match with DWP. That gave us an 82% match. So 82% of our register matched with the DWP, compared to a national average of 78. So we're a bit above national average, and that's to do. I mean, we've got robust systems in place, but also to do with the demographics. We don't have a lot of the hard to register groups within our area.
Tony, sorry, do you know when you say you do cross references with the DWP database? Why would you be on the DWP database?
National insurance number.
Because the national insurance number.
Yeah.
Does the national insurance then know where you live? Is that's what the check is it?
No, your name.
It knows your name and...
right, so it's checking your name and your NI number.
Yeah.
But not where you live, because the way you live is your bit of information.
Yeah.
So it's just checking your identity, marries up, etc. Have you had to, forgive my ignorance on this one, I should know already, I'm sure, but the NI number, has that been used beforehand?
Not for registration purposes, not until the introduction of
right, so that's a brand new process involved.
Actually, in many ways, Chair, there's not much difference in using that and using the passport number, is there? To say it's singly registered, that's
kind of identifier.
You are.
Yeah.
And passport numbers we do use within the process as well as another check.
Gotcha.
So the matching with the DWP data gave us an 82% match rate. And then we do some further work where we look at local information. So key amongst the local information is our council tax information. Huge database of information there, and that brought our matches up to 89%. And again, we a step above the national average, 86, which was running at 86%. So that was last year, or 2013. It was done for real in July 14, and we can see a small increase. So our DWP matching had gone up from 82% to 84%, and running the local matches again, we'd gone from 89 to 91%, and still above the national averages. So it shows that we're collecting more people, confirming more people on the register as we go forward, but it is a bit of diminishing returns as we go on. So what does that mean in registration rates? And I think just this is with a health warning, because there are no official registration rates. We know what we've got on the register, but we don't know what we haven't got registered. If we did, they'd be registered.
So, Tony, the point is you wouldn't know how to... You don't necessarily know the 100% of the population of those that are eligible to vote. Yeah. So they should be on there. So there'll always be a part of the population unknown almost.
I mean, the only time you can get an accurate snapshot is at full census time, which is every 10 years.
There's going to be a non-census now, is there?
Whatever.
I thought they stopped it in the last one. Anyway, that's a pretty big conversation. So basically, that's another vehicle you have to check. So you don't never know if you're 100%.
No, and as I say, that snapshot you can only take every 10 years, assuming it's going to continue.
Yeah.
So what we've done is look at the latest population data, which is mid-year 2013 from the Office of National Statistics. and it is an estimate, but the estimated population in the district, 18 plus, is 61,900, or was at that period of time, and compared with how many people we have on the electoral register, the last register publication, which was just a week or so ago, we've got 60,586. So our estimated registration rate is 98%.
Gotcha. So that's 98%.
Now, that sits well with others. There aren't any league tables on this, so we can't say for certain where we are. But I hope it gives some sense that we're where we should be. Certainly not far away from as full as a register as we should expect to get.
Councillor Randall, you have a question?
Yeah, I know, but I can never understand actually why the forms aren't given when people move into a house.
How do you know when somebody moves into a house?
Because often with your council tax, if somebody's going to move out, they obviously notify the council they're moving out, and they often have a forwarding address, don't they? So actually, you could capture that time. You're moving out from here and you're going there, who's moving in.
We do capture that information. Yeah. We do it through council tax, and also through we work with housing associations and landlords. So the council tax is key. Council tax records are key in this process. So there is a data exchange between council tax and elections. I'm not sure it's weekly, but at least monthly. Yeah. So we're collecting that data, and then the forms go out to the household.
So there's a kind of range of data sources you have to look at, cross-reference.
Yeah, and of course the other key thing we do is we go and knock on everybody's door at least once a year. We'll sometimes do it more often.
Yes, going to say that. No, I've come across a few people actually who said, "I thought the council ran today."
Yeah.
I can see, checking that on the person, and actually I'm not, because I've just moved in, so I've just registered.
Okay, well, actually this leads us into the canvas work. So we've just done what we called a mini canvas, which was a more targeted canvas, picking up some of those who hadn't responded to the previous canvas, which was carried out in November time, and that has produced some more information which we're dealing with at the moment, so we need to analyse that and see what that leaves us. The bullet points there, well, the first two are really the under-registered groups. The government identified about 4 under-registered groups. Certainly the 2 that are most important to us are care homes, where typically the reliance is on whoever's running the care home to deal with registration for the residents there, and it is very much reliant on that individual and the engagement they have. So we're doing some more targeted work on care homes, and that's a national picture. EU citizens residents in the UK, that's non-British passport holders. They are typically, as a group, are under-registered compared to the general population. Thinking behind that is, one key element is that EU citizens don't get to vote in our general election, they vote at home, or their country of origin, thank you. And so there's not quite the same level of engagement, but they are eligible to vote in local elections, so every reason they should be on the register.
Right, so tell me, they can't vote in general elections?
They can't vote in the general, but they can vote in the local
council elections.
Yeah.
Surely in general elections they're able to vote in their own country?
Yes, they will vote in their country of origin, or certainly are able to do that.
Is this part of the issue that they don't necessarily know they have the right to vote?
Well, we believe they do know they have the right, but they're just not engaged in the process in the same numbers. It's not to say they're not engaged at all, but anecdotally across the country this is an issue. We don't have any detailed data on that within our patch. What we do know is we certainly don't exclude them from the process, and we will door knock on every property, and we will work with people to deliver information in other languages as well.
And again, it's very difficult, I guess, to know how many people there are we're talking about.
Yeah. So those are the 2 under-registered groups that we think may be an issue for us. The other 2 nationally are students. Students tend not to register wherever they are, and I have students in my family, and I know that for a fact. No matter how much you cajole them and push them, they are very reluctant to make that particular registration themselves. But we don't have a huge student population, so it's particularly an issue in university towns.
Is this one of the reasons why we have perhaps a higher rate potentially then?
Yeah, I think so, and that's reflective.
Yeah.
And the other under-registered group is tenancies, large tenancy populations, so there tends to be more transition.
Kind of transient
population. So, and again, we don't have a huge issue with that.
How much do you tell if you're a traveller? How does that work?
Good question. I think if you have a resident, if you are on a site, then we pick you up through a canvas if you happen to be there at the time of the canvassing.
Depends how many of those people will have NI numbers, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, was that? Sorry, Councillor?
Depends how many of those will ever have an NI number.
Yeah. So, sorry do you have to have that NI number to be able to? That's a critical factor.
It's the easiest way to make the match with DWP, but there are other ways.
But if you haven't got one, then you can't?
No, that's not the case.
That's simply a matching exercise.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Councillor Randall?
Yeah, I'm just saying about travellers. Does your national insurance number not just automatically arrive to you? Like you register your birth and you're given something, and that's how it automatically comes.
Some travellers never registered.
But where to go to? It needs to know where to go to, doesn't it, somehow?
That's true. Thank you.
I think it's more of an academic point for us than it's an issue for us in this area.
Yeah.
So in the rolling registration is a stray bullet point. I was tweaking this as we writing for the last meeting. But we are continuing. It is a rolling registration process, so people can register at any time, particularly through the online facility now. So it doesn't mean because you missed the run of the register or missed the canvas period, you've got to stay off.
And Tony, is this the case always? You'll be able to register whenever? So is there some often campaigns you can run around this to keep momentum going?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of publicity. There has been a lot over the last 12 months. I mean, it's probably we've become a little bit used to it, and I think it will ramp up again as we move closer to the election. National Voter Registration Day is part of the ramping up, and I suspect it will have passed a lot of us by. This actually happened last week.
Happened last week, yeah.
But we did something with it here. We had some posters and leaflets available in our reception. We were where we had the opportunity, where anybody who phoned in or made a personal call that day, if they were prepared to listen, we told them a little bit about electoral registration.
Excellent. So when somebody is calling with a complaint, you don't have the opportunity?
Yes. As long as they were prepared to listen. But it was interesting, we actually had a 300% increase on registrations that one day.
What does that mean?
Well, we had about 120 as opposed to 30 odd
That was worth running.
Yeah.
So, it was certainly worth running.
When
So on some of our seats, when it certainly could be good.
when you work out the difference you've got between what is the population and is 1,500, well, if you do an extra 100 in a day, it's 7% of the gap, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, those all haven't been matched, and we may find that somebody's tried to register online and they're already registered, so I'm not sure they were all valid registrations, but it does show
Still a reasonable percentage.
That's good.
And what else are we doing? There's a whole host of stuff that's going on and ongoing. But in the run-up to the elections, both general election and local elections, there's a 2-page article in Daventry Calling, which is going out early next month. Information on our website. Social media, we're putting out messages on our Twitter feed and Facebook feeds to remind people on a fairly regular basis that register. If you want to vote in the election, you need to register. media releases we're putting out. In the last couple of weeks of registration before the election, I think the cut-off date is April the 20th for registration, we'll put a message on our telephone call waiting. So if you're ringing in and instead of getting the pipe music or whatever message we're putting out this week, we'll remind people about registration. The little notice on the right-hand side there, this is something that we're trying. It's not something we've done before, but other authorities have done it. If you're shopping in Argos, you should find you have this on the back of your till receipt. So something we thought we'd try as another way of trying to sort of get some promotion there. So we're running that for about 10 weeks, I think.
It's about keep repeating the messages now.
That's right, and this is happening across the country. And I think the final point I wanted to leave you with is the one I mentioned earlier on. No one will be deleted from the register until the end of 2015. So unless there is evidence to remove somebody. So the default position is people who were on the last register pre-IR will be on the register for this election, set of elections. And the government were very keen that is a message that gets out there. I may not political point on this at all, but clearly with general election there is a drive to have people registered and unable to.
People don't feel disenfranchised in the process, do they, at this particular point in time?
But I think for us, in as a electoral registration authority, the challenge comes beyond December 15.
Yeah.
So when people fall off unless they're matched, then we'll need to have another push on this.
It's a fluid position, though, isn't it, all the time?
Yeah, but I mean, and rolling registration, which was on the previous slide, was around. That is a continuous process, and we're looking now, and we wanted to get a feel for sort of rolling canvas as well, as opposed to doing an annual canvas where we hit everywhere, is to do a full year out canvas. We just go round and round and round to catch people who aren't registered, essentially get them on the register.
And Tony, with the software or the system this is kept in, what kind of format of database is it? And is it the same as the previous one? Is it basically still registers, just different process now?
Yeah, our register is on the same software system it was previously. There's a lot of work going on nationally. There's 3 or 4 electoral management systems, and each of those the people who supply and develop those systems have been working with the government, so the systems could talk to DWP. So there's been a lot of work going on around that, which was why they had this dry run, just to make sure the whole system didn't fall
also
over.
functioning correctly, the referencing databases. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. So any other questions there for Tony? No, sorry it was a bit late, Tony, but that was, I think, very useful. Only a small hardcore of us, but it's still worth it nonetheless. Councillor, any other questions?
No. No, the only thing I was going to... No, there was one thing I was going to ask. If you registered online, but actually then a few months down the line you think, God, did I register online? Will it flag up if you've already registered, or will it just sort of allow you to register again? Or
it will be caught somewhere in the system. I'm not sure where it's caught, so the point where you enter, or it goes into the system. There's an online facility, but that doesn't write your name straight onto the register. There's checks and balances to go through.
Okay.
So.
And what would stop me registering my son on there? Because obviously I'd know all his information, I could know what his national insurance number is. Because the same as we used to do, filling your form, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, we seek confirmation from the individual, or we will do after December 15, to confirm those that are already on the register.
What, in a written form? Or?
Yeah, there'll be a form. We'll be sending out forms.
Right, okay.
The HEF form, which I mentioned, which is a household inquiry form, typically will be followed up by an individual ITR form, which is an invitation to register.
Right, okay.
So each individual will need to register themselves or confirm their registration. They don't necessarily need to do it by sending the form back, they can do it online.
Yeah.
But it will need an NI number or some number where we can reference.
A unique identifier.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Parker, any questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
No, very good. Thank you for that.
I think just to wrap up, I mean, remind you as a committee that you've already put forward recommendations around improving our actual registration work, which is incorporated within what we're doing now.
And this is
Very pleasing
so
to see.
You're happy with this?
I am very happy.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that, Tony. So, if no further comments on that one, then I'm always conscious of time, but I'm also conscious that we have to do a proper discussion. Let's move on to the final item, and that's to agree a portfolio holder to attend the 14th of April 2015. Any
Councillor Daniel Crubin.
Councillor Randall? Do you agree with this?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if you
I've
look at
married them all recently, haven't we?
but if you look at the hard time that we've given Julie,
Yeah. No.
then it's right and appropriate that we understand how the portfolio holder is dealing with this as well as the officer.
So in terms of the scope for the question, I think Councillor Cribin for sure. We need him to really come to us with really a deep understanding of what he's doing to tackle these issues. And then we have the opportunity for him to go through the document and detail the performance gaps.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
really explain himself as we've done earlier. Okay, thank you. So we can put that on the agenda for next time, please. And could you invite him on that, please? Great. So
If
that's.
for any reason he can't come, do we have a backup?
Well, I'm not sure what the circumstance will be, but
Just in case he may be on holiday or
Good point.
something.
could I recommend Councillor Howard
Yeah.
as a reserve? I think there's a couple of things we touched upon tonight. Councillor, happy with that? Councillor Howard.
In all honesty, if not Councillor Howard, but if Councillor Cribin can come, Councillor Howard for the subsequent one.
You can what, sorry?
Councillor Howard for the
For the
subsequent
next one. Yeah. So Councillor reserve for this one, or Councillor Howard for the next one, if he can't. So finally, at long last. Thank you very much for 2010. I don't think there's any other business, is there? Urgent business? Thank you very much for your work. I think we've put a couple of great reports through tonight. Thank you, Councillor Randolph and Councillor Long. Let's close the meeting there. Thank you for coming, Tony, for the presentation.